We're live. Hi, TMV.
We're live.
We're live.
Just my
We're
camera goes
live.
out of focus. We're live.
Beautiful. Welcome to Cosmic Divide, episode 21, live on the Acend Club channel. This is where I think all future episodes will probably go, just because instead of waiting 2.5 hours to finish the episode and then having to send it to our editor and then having our editor have to download the whole thing and then have to edit it and then re-upload it and then we have to download it and then upload it to the YouTube channel, it's just live and it's going to be great. And hopefully
We
we
won't
won't
make
say
any
anything that'll get us
mistakes.
canceled because we
Yeah,
can't edit it out in
because it's
post.
live. Yes, because on all the other episodes, by the way, some of the
Yeah.
things that Elevate says, oh my goodness, oh
Yep.
my goodness,
It
oh,
definitely wasn't me. It definitely was not me. I can promise you that. TMV has some wild opinions about stuff, let me tell you. Actually, I won't tell you because, who would host the show with me then?
Yeah. And my wildest opinion is the Gentlemate's logo. That's the only one that could
You know
come
what?
back to bite me.
I don't even think that's very wild. I think it's
No,
shit too.
there
Oh,
you go.
darn, there goes the monetization. Oh, well.
Mistake 101 of doing Valorant podcasts on YouTube. It can't be avoided. It just can't be avoided. So yeah,
No.
we're doing this live, which as you say, we'll be doing probably from here on out, or at least, I mean, you said, forever, but who knows what'll happen, in the future. The heat death of the universe might
This
come
could be the last
before.
episode, depending
Could
on
be
how
the
it
last
goes.
episode. That's the thing, and who knows? It could be the last episode. You never know. But we've got quite a few things to talk about. Obviously, Masters Madrid is over. Which honestly, like compared to, and let's just start with this. Compared to other Masters, how do you feel about it? Because for me, this one obviously only 8 teams. It did feel, I think, a little smaller in
Mm-hmm.
scope. Um, Also, like, for the other masters and whatever, they often do the thing where, the kind of first stage is played in, like, a smaller venue, and then they,
Yeah.
like, go to some massive venue, later on for the playoffs, and then it's like, whoa, look at that. Whereas this one, I'm pretty sure, was all at the same place. So there was definitely some kind of, like, smaller elements to it in terms of that. So for me, it didn't quite feel as grand, I guess. I don't know. What do you think, Elevate?
Yeah, I mean, I think honestly, it felt a little bit like a throwback to 2021. It was kind of like back to the original Masters. Obviously, Sentinels winning makes it even more sort of like nostalgia throwback to some extent. But
Yes.
I definitely agree that the scope of it felt kind of small. The productions felt a little bit um, not like lackluster, but just a little bit more bare bones, I guess. It didn't seem like it was quite the spectacle that some of the others have been. And obviously, none of them are going to come close to like champions ever during the year, but it definitely felt a little bit smaller. And maybe just the whole timing of everything, where it's like we have this huge off season, right? Everybody's like desperate for Valorant. Then we just get absolutely slammed with like insane amounts
Yeah.
of Valorant, and then there's like a 1 week break, and then we're into the Masters. So it's not, I don't know. It was almost like there was still like a little bit of, at least for me as somebody who watched every single game, there was a little bit of like Valorant fatigue going into the Masters. And since I'd
Yes.
seen every team play already a ton of games, it was almost just like a continuation of the kickoff tournament because
Mm.
nobody changed anything really except for like a few
Yeah.
teams tinkering with a couple of comps here and there. What about you?
Yeah, that's a fair point as well. And like, I'm not saying that I want. And look, they've said for like the next, they've said for the 2025 schedule or whatever it'll be, that they're gonna spread things out more in general. We'll start earlier. Maybe there's a bigger gap in between masters to give teams more time. Maybe there's a bigger gap, between like the masters and when the season starts. Because I mean, look, for again, it's probably a good thing that some of these EMEA teams didn't go super deep in this tournament because they start in like a week,
Yeah.
and they're starting up again. So it's like they would have been, if an EMEA team won this Masters, they would have been like, and for Sentinels and GenG as well, and obviously with they're gonna lose like the whole day to travel basically as well in their life. So they're not gonna have, they're gonna come into week one at least playing the same comps. Like they don't have
Yeah.
time to change anything. They're just gonna be straight into it, which I think, hopefully for next year, yeah, we just get a bit more spread out because, like you say, we're just getting the worst of both worlds this year. We got the super long off season of nothing into constant barrage.
Yeah.
That's all there is to do. Like, for people like us, like it's just every day, just crazy amounts, and then like you say, Madrid comes on, and Madrid is kind of nice. It's just like I think having 2 games a day, I must say, I'm a big fan of that. I hope they're not going to when we get to 12 and 16 team tournaments. But for me, 2 games a day is just the best way of doing it. When you get the 3 games a day, and like if you get a long day or if you get a tech pause and you're looking
Mhm.
like a 12-hour day, an 11, 10-hour day. I mean, I remember I've done days of streaming for some of these tournaments where there's been 3 games. It's been a 14-hour stream, for
Yep.
just 3 games. If you get a big tech pause, that's just what happens, right? So that always I feel like is just like 2 games. I feel like is always a good amount, right? If you
Yep.
get 2 fast 2 O's, I mean, it's still 4 hours long. Like, it's still a lot of Valorant to watch. But even if it goes the full 3 maps on both times, it's still manageable. To still have that and like pay attention and kind of be watching it. So that's what I hope they do for the future. One good thing about Masters Madrid as well was the lack of tech pauses.
Yep.
I think as we're going forward, we're definitely getting, obviously, like I remember the first Reykjavik was a mess, right? And
Yeah.
the first year was kind of a mess, to be
Yeah.
honest, of, like rules and, obviously the Ascend champs rule thing and just
What are
full
you
of tech
talking about?
pauses.
It was the cleanest, most wonderful win of all time. You're not allowed to say
Yes.
that here.
Yes. So yeah, there was just a lot of weird stuff going on early on. But I think it looks like we've got to a point where probably the production team is all familiar with each other. They know what the common problems are going to be. They know how to fix them. It's we're in a good spot right now, in terms of that, which I hope will carry on for the regional leagues. I have some doubt, particularly for EMEA, because it always seems like something's going on at EMEA. But then again, they've moved venue, so maybe it was the venue. Maybe it was where they were, just wasn't a very good place to have it. I don't know.
Or maybe
Um,
now there will be more kinks to work out on broadcast. Definitely possible. But
yeah, but
Pacific's also moving, so I don't know. We'll see.
yeah, it could be bad for the first couple of weeks again.
I
But
do have
hopefully,
one question for you.
go on.
Um, about this kind of like condensed schedule and how it's going to affect teams. I was thinking about it. I was like, I wonder if it kind of just benefits a team like Sentinels now at this point, since they have 6 championship points, if they should just
Chill.
really chill for the next like 3 or 4 weeks, right? Just like come
Well,
in.
they still want to qualify for Shanghai, I'm sure.
Well, yeah, but as long as they just finish middle of the pack and get into the playoffs, like,
Hmm.
you know, I mean,
Yeah.
obviously, it's always dangerous when you take your foot off the gas a little bit, but just for their own sanity, because they really don't have any time, right? It's 2 weeks until the first game. They start against 100 Thieves, who are going to be super hungry to beat them,
Hmm.
coming to the season with their new stuff. And so it's like, I mean, if you're Sentinels, like, when do you
That's the
when do you
thing.
when do
Like,
you get a break
yeah,
if you just keep winning?
yeah. Like the gap between Fnatic this time last year and everyone else was so big that Fnatic could have just taken their foot off the gas. But I don't think that in Americas versus some of these, good Americas teams, the Sentinels can just
Yeah,
do
true.
turn up and beat 100 Thieves. I think that won't be possible. Um, but I think I don't know. I think next year will be better. Obviously, I think the big help as well will be, for me, the off season next year with tier 2 carrying on.
Hmm.
It will just mean that there's always something going on, right? Because and hopefully, and we'll get to Clove later on in this episode as well. But like what's been happening for the past couple of years is like they often release an agent or a map. Like for Sunset and ISO, we were kind of left, wondering like, what is the meta on this map, right?
Right.
Is ISO any good? We don't know because there's no games going on that anyone cares about, so we
Yep.
don't actually know. Whereas for next year as well, like that should be fixed. So hopefully next year, I think everything should be better. We're kind of slowly improving as we go along. Masters Madrid had the highest, viewing figures of any Valorant tournament so far, which is good.
Yep.
Um, so I
1.6
think,
million, over 1.6 million.
yeah, more than
Pretty
1.6
nice.
million. Uh, and I do think, a lot of people, particularly last year, were angry at the whole partnerships deal, and they didn't think it was a very good idea. But I think at this point, I think you're starting to see it just makes everything a lot cleaner. It makes
Mm,
everything a lot easier to follow, I think. You know who the teams are, like, oh, they've made a roster change. Oh, they're still the same team from last year. Like, it just makes everything kind of just easier to follow, to be honest. And I think that that's good for people who are kind of coming in and out, that they can go, oh yeah, I remember, like, oh yeah, I remember that Sentinels won Masters Madrid, and oh yeah, like they were good, and oh, what's happened to NRG? They aren't, all that kind of stuff. I think it's just going to be a lot easier to follow as we go forward. So I'm the future is bright. I do think that and they will. I mean, it sounds like from what Leo has said as well that they're going to go for next year a similar sort of kickoff deal,
mm-hmm.
right? Like when that's what basically I think that that's going to be the way. This year's format is probably what you can expect going forward. Or something like it. He did say they think they can improve the kickoff thing. Not having single elim maybe for the qualifications. Stuff like that. Obviously, not having 11 teams will be a help as well. Of
Yeah.
course, you get a nicer number there to make it a bit more even. Also, championship points, I imagine, will be perhaps a more fair way of judging the teams in terms of, giving them seeds and whatnot as well. So,
Right. I kind
hopefully
of
that
liked
will.
kickoff, honestly. I thought it was fine.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
thought kickoff wasn't too bad. I mean, I like single elim, so yeah,
Yeah.
I was into kickoff. For someone like me, of course, all the games being on at the same time does create some busy days, but that's the life I've chosen to lead, so I can't complain too much. Shall we get into the actual Madrid itself?
Yeah, and I think let's just go one at a time. Let's start with fourth place and just kind of go through each of the teams. And
Yeah.
yeah, so talk to me a little bit about Loud. I guess maybe
Ooh.
prospects coming into playoffs and then their actual performance in playoffs. They go at 0-2, losing to first round was PaperX.
No, Send then Paper.
First round was Sentinels in a close 2-1 series,
close
and then they lose 2-0 to PaperX.
Yeah, the 2-1 loss to Sentinels for Loud, I think, is I think that shows that, like, okay, like after that game, I was like, oh, Loud could, it could be Loud Send grand final. You could definitely see that, and I think going into that Paper X game, that's probably what most people maybe even thought it would be, right? That it's going to be America's 1-2 grand final, and obviously it didn't end up playing out like that. I think Loud, their big advantage in this tournament, for them and Paper Rex really, was that they were just far more experienced than all the other teams, right? Sentinels were a weird case where the individuals were experienced, but not as a team. But then of course you had teams like GenG, you had the EMEA teams, who were complete newcomers essentially to a kind of international stage. So that was the kind of thing that I think Loud had going for them. My prospects for Loud, like going forward and coming into it, I didn't think that Loud could win. I'll be honest. I didn't think that there was a great chance for them to win this tournament, because I just didn't think that they were going to be better than Sentinels at any point. I didn't really see that path for them. Like, there was a clear team that they had played before that I thought, well, Sentinels are better than you, and that will just be the case in my opinion. So I didn't ever think that they were going to win it, but I think going out 0-2, and particularly losing to a Paper Rex team that I think we'll get to, like losing 2-0 to Paper Rex, and like, I don't know, man. Paper Rex are both these teams.
They're an
Loud and
enigma,
Paper Rex,
that's for sure.
Yeah, they're both in this kind of weird state of like, they have good players, obviously.
Yep.
They are good.
And
like,
they're both essentially the same team that they were last year, with one player different, right?
Yeah, with one superstar being replaced for kind of, a tier 1 level player who people may be a bit unsure about. It's like they are very much mirrored in that kind of sense. And it's very, very weird in this tournament because they finished third and fourth, these teams, but I don't know how good they actually are. Like, I don't feel that. Normally, like, if a team finishes third or fourth in a global international event, you're the third or fourth best team in the world. You normally come away from it and be like, oh, they're a really good team, but just don't, like a DRX of old, right? No one came away from when DRX were finishing third or fourth and being like, oh no, they aren't that good. Everyone's just like, oh, they just can't get over the hump, right? They just can't beat the best team in the world. But no one thought like, oh, DRX aren't very good. But like Loud and Paper Rex. And I guess let's focus on Loud first. Like QCK, it was kind of interesting because he did have like a couple good performances in this tournament, right?
Yep.
But then I think in the game versus Paper X that they got eliminated,
He was
I'll just
pretty
go and
bad.
check it now.
Yeah.
Yeah, he had a really bad game,
Yeah.
and so it's like, you know, you're always wondering, you're always thinking like, and it's so difficult, right? Because you don't want to put on QCK, like you'd never want to compare him to Aspas because that's just unfair, right? You never want to have to put that comparison on anyone, but it's almost impossible not to because you're always thinking in the back of your head like, you know, with Aspas they maybe win this game, you know, like or Aspas wins
Yeah.
them around here where QCK doesn't, and they've tried almost I think to hide it somewhat by saying like, oh let's not put QCK on Jet in a lot of these instances as well, just to make sure that like, you know, the comparison isn't there even more. But it's just I don't know. I don't know about you. Tell me about Loud because I don't know. Like going forward, I think the question for Loud is if you were to guess in Americas where they are going to finish, like you know, if you did like a league table of Americas, where do you think they'll finish right now? Because for me, it's not second or
Mm-hmm.
first. Or is it for
Yeah,
you?
I think we'll get to that after I give my
Okay.
thoughts of them, because I think that is an interesting question to talk about. So I think you kind of highlighted the main point for me, which is QCK, and it might be kind of unfair to put this all on him, but realistically, uh, Loud's performance this tournament was essentially based on how he did. Like if he had decent games or really good games, they were winning, and if he was kind of in the middling to the low end of the scoreboard, then they were losing. And it was basically pretty simple like that. There might be a few outlier maps where less, just kind of like wins them the map, which happens every now and then. But for the most part, it was kind of down to his performance, and I think that is a little bit concerning, just because he doesn't seem to be that consistent of a player, at least at this point. With Ospas, sure, there were a few stinkers here or there from him, but basically you knew what you were getting every map out of this guy. And with QCK, it does seem to be like sometimes he's insane, other times he's kind of like a non-factor. And in a role like Duelist, I think it's fairly imperative that you have at least like fairly consistent impact in the game. I think it's also really interesting to think about that Loud, and again, this goes to like the confusion of how good is this team, because on paper, okay, they finished the Swiss stage, right, 2-1. They lose their only losses to GenG, who ends up in the grand finals. Okay, not that big of a deal. Then you look at it, they beat FPX, who was the worst team at the event by a mile, and then they beat EDG, who were like the most inconsistent and potentially second worst team at the event.
Yep.
And it's like, well, those wins are not really that impressive in the grand scheme of things to make playoffs. So then when they play Sentinels and it's close, and these are like, the first map was a blowout, but then it was 14-12, 14-12.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah. And to me, that speaks a little bit more to just like the regional rivals. These guys have played each other like a million times. They know exactly what's going on. Because then when they go up against Paper X and they get kind of absolutely plowed 2-0, it's just the inconsistency, and that parallel to Paper X is so interesting there too, because Paper X is like super hot one game, really bad the next. Loud is kind of the same way, super hot one game, really bad the next. They're both playing weird comps, they're both making a lot of mistakes, sometimes they're playing insanely well. And so yeah, I think going forward into this year, I do have some questions about this team just because of QCK, and like the rest of the players I trust. It was interesting. I was keeping the stats for the event, and I did a spreadsheet comparison of all their stats from kickoff and then all their stats from this event. And every Loud player performed better at this event than they did at kickoff, which maybe speaks to either stepping up on stage or just worse competition at this event, probably than in Americas. Maybe I don't really know how to read.
I mean, honestly, if you look at Loud's run, they beat Sentinels, Leviathan, and then who do they beat in the playoffs to make it? Oh, they beat EG. So
Yeah.
that one maybe not so much, but I mean, yeah, if you compare like Sen Leviathan to FPX EDG, like yeah, you could understand like your stats might look better against and I do think like that EDG game, obviously they absolutely stomped. So that might be a bit of like an outlier when you're winning like 13-3, 13-2. Everyone's stats are going to look, probably pretty decent.
Yeah, I mean, I think to answer your question that you asked, Their prospects for, let's just say split one, because I think
Okay.
talking about the entire year
Yeah.
is too much. I'd say their prospects for split one are probably no lower than like fourth place.
But only three. Well, this is an interesting point because only three qualify to Masters Shanghai.
Yeah,
So
I
right
could see that.
now,
I could see them missing Shanghai. I definitely could.
but I'm just gonna ask you a yes or no. Will they make it? Give me a yes or no.
Um, I'm gonna say no. I don't.
Oh, Loud
I
haven't missed an event, right? Since they joined Valorant?
um
I don't think they have. I think Loud have been
no.
at every event
I
that
think
they've.
they bombed out of a couple, but I don't think they've missed
Yeah,
one.
I think
Yeah.
they. Yeah.
So
So
yeah,
that's a pretty big call.
yeah. I mean, I think they potentially will, just because. I mean, how do you feel about their comps? How do you feel about their map pool? To me, it does not feel that good. It feels pretty shaky, and so especially if they don't have time to switch anything up, like they're still experimenting stuff, right?
Mhm.
They tried the Yoru on Ascent because obviously it's a much better version of the Phoenix comp that they're running. It's awful. They immediately go back to the Phoenix comp. It's also still bad. Like, what are you doing? You know, like how do you fix this?
Yeah, I mean, I think that they have cooked the wrong thing. You know, they've lent into Breach when the choice was Gecko. You know, that's my honest opinion. I
That
think
is
that
actually a very good point.
yeah, to me that they've lent into the wrong initiators, and I think they're leaning into Viper, which I think is good. I think they're correct. I think they're correct to play Omen Viper on pretty much every map. I agree with them. I think that that's a decent idea. Or Harbor on, you know, certain like Icebox or whatever. Right? Like I agree. Double controller with Viper every map. They are ahead of people in that sense. But I think playing it with like a Breach, I don't think is a good idea. Right? I think
Mhm.
they're and playing it the Phoenix again, I would just say like you could swap Phoenix for KO and you would instantly do better. Like even
Mhm.
if it's not Yoru, like if you want to stick with like no dive stuff, like playing
Yeah,
KO is better. Like it's
I
going
agree.
to be better, 100%. Like this is the thing with Phoenix. Like there's just no way that in my mind there's never an argument that Phoenix is better than KO on any any map. Right, and don't bring up the ult again. I don't care. I know Phoenix ult 6 cost. Yeah, it's cool, great, but KO is just better. KO is pretty good too. You might know that.
Yeah,
Uh,
I do think one interesting thing about that was when we were talking to NBS about it on,
mhm.
I think it was on the live stream from the facility. He was saying that he thinks Phoenix is like decent in sort of like a one off, basically
Yeah, little
like
surprise pick.
little surprise comp type of thing, and that
Yeah,
kind of makes sense to me.
yeah,
But yeah,
yeah. But a lot of agents, you know, like
yeah,
getting the surprise factor for a lot of agents is it's just going to be very good, right? When your opponent has no idea what you're going to do, like that's a big advantage to have
right.
on any map, right? And teams should utilize that more, in my opinion, right? Like they should have a base comp, and then they should have a surprise random comp that they bring out for a certain opponent potentially. You know, if they like it against a certain opponent. I think that's probably the correct way of doing it, right? So you've still got the comp that you're mostly focusing on, but in the back of your mind, you're like, we can always switch to this kind of surprise pick if we're struggling on a map, or
Right.
if there's a big game that we think this could work against a certain team, right? Like I think that that's a good idea. But yeah, I don't think that that's really too good. To answer my own question of whether I think that Loud will go, I still trust them enough.
Okay.
Now I can't remember the groups off the top of my head. Maybe they have a hard group. I don't know. I can't remember. But I still trust Loud enough. Like if you're saying no, we're probably thinking Sentinels. We're probably thinking NRG. I'm still putting Loud, I think, ahead of everyone else for me.
Okay.
But
I can tell you their matches,
okay.
what they have coming up. So week one they play Energy.
But the thing is, it's
Uh,
not really the matches that matter, is it? It's the group that matters because everyone in their group is playing the same teams. So really,
True, but
you want to look at the teams that they're not playing.
well, also, I mean, strength of schedule is kind of important too. Just well, I no, I see what you're saying, but
Yeah,
yeah.
because
So
everyone. So in their group, they've got Lev, 100 Thieves, MIBR, Furia, EG.
yeah,
Like Loud should be MIBR, Furia, EG in terms of versus the other teams, pretty
yeah,
comfortably. So they should make playoffs, and then it's kind of just how good do you think Lev, 100 Thieves are?
right.
And I have more faith in Loud, I think.
Okay, yeah. I mean, I think that's fair. It is going to be very interesting to see. Obviously there's some moves that happened. G2 has a new player. Does that make them
I
better?
mean, I mean,
Yeah,
looking at the other group, I mean, the other group's a mess.
yeah,
The other group is an absolute mess. Like you've got Sen and NRG, and then you've got like one of these teams, of Cloud9, G2, or Crew, is making the playoffs, but they've all
all of them have
made
made
changes.
changes. Yeah.
Yeah.
True, true, true.
So it's a bit of a mess in that group. I think if you're 100 Thieves or maybe an EG or someone or MIBR, you're probably feeling a bit ripped off. That
Yeah,
you've got the much harder group potentially.
true.
Uh, so yeah, that's tough. So there we go. Loud. Who knows what will happen?
Yeah, what are the takeaways from Madrid? We don't know anything, and we don't know how they're gonna do. How's that for analysis?
Yeah. See now, but let's come to, as we've already kind of brought them up, Paper Rex. A
Yep.
team that, as we say, are somewhat similar to Loud in kind of the kind of general makeup of their team and whatever. But to me, I have more faith in Paper Rex, and I think the reason I have more faith in Paper
Interesting.
Rex is because Paper Rex. Well, one, I feel more confident in kind of that overall vision. If we consider Loud's vision to be this kind of weird comp that they're going for, and the Phoenix stuff that's their direction, I
Hmm.
feel just more confident in general about Paper Rex and their direction because it's the same direction they've been on forever,
Hmm.
right? That it's the same kind of direction in general. But I also think that there were moments in this tournament, particularly in that Loud game, where I think you saw Paper Rex and thought, okay, this is like if like there were rounds and moments where you thought this is like Paper Rex, right? This is the good Paper Rex.
Yeah.
They're making good decisions, they're playing well. Because to me, there's kind of a couple things that make up Paper Rex, and I always think that when Paper Rex play bad, it's actually because they're focusing on being aggressive too much. And when Paper Rex are playing well, it's when they realize that what makes them good is their ability to combo things on the fly and come up with ideas as a team on the fly, right? Whereas I
Hmm.
feel like, and that's the thing, but I feel like sometimes they get into their own head thinking that it's just aggression that makes them good instead of their team play. Like that's the thing that makes Paper Rex good is the fact that their team play is much better than most other teams. And in a game
Right,
like
and when they,
Valorant,
when they get into
yeah,
that like individual, I need to win this round for my
yeah,
team style.
that's when they
That's when they
struggle.
get really destroyed by teams that are just like happy to let them walk into them, basically.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. I think that is the thing, and I think that that's cost them. In fact, in some of their grand finals, where they've changed comps back to like an old school comp or a super aggro comp that they've gone to that maybe they weren't playing before, and so then they end up just like thinking, oh, we just have to be more aggressive, and that will solve our
Hmm.
problem. And that's actually, I think, cost them a couple grand finals that they've been in. Is doing that rather than just sticking to like what they know and playing as a team. But I do think that Paper X, one thing for me again, why I feel more confident about them than Loud is because I have seen it. They were more inconsistent than Loud, I think, as well, though. Right?
Yeah.
Like they weren't inconsistent map to map. They were inconsistent round to round. Like
Yeah. And
they
day to day, and just like, yeah.
yeah, just at any moment, moments in round, they would be in the one moment they're doing something really nice and doing something together, and then the next moment someone's just walked out on their own and made a terrible decision.
Yeah.
And like so, but that to me is quite fixable. It feels like maybe there isn't necessarily the trust level, and I feel like for Paper Rex, they kept saying during the entire tournament, we know we're not that good.
Yeah. That's
And
the
somehow
interesting
we're yeah,
thing.
and
Yeah.
somehow we're still like they know they have other gears to get to. They seem confident that they will get better, but they know that there's a problem. Whereas with Loud, I feel like you didn't necessarily get that. I feel like
Hmm.
Loud were more like, yeah, this is our best shot. We're trying our best here. This
Hmm.
is us. Whereas I feel like Paper Rex just have that confidence that, probably by the end of stage one, maybe going into Shanghai, they will have found, how to adapt Monyet into the team, or Monye, or Monyoy, or Monyet, whichever one it is, get him better adapted into the team. Because that obviously is the question. I know that we have talked about this, that we would like Monyet to just be full time smokes, and let Forsaken learn Raze, or maybe don't even play Raze, you know, play something else instead if you want to. Are you still on that train with Paper Rex?
Yeah, and I think this is a great point to just kind of like transition into, like we did with Loud. We were kind of focusing on QCK because like Loud, this is the one player that they've changed from Jing to Monyet, and Monyet was a player that was probably the most inconsistent player at the tournament, if we're being honest. It was, you know, this round he's losing for the team, the next round he's losing for the team, then he's winning them around. I think I'd be very curious. I don't know if anybody actually tracked this, but he probably had maybe like the most aces at the tournament, potentially. I know he had a lot of aces. There's definitely a lot of aces from him, but also an unbelievable amount of mistakes. He had, I think, the highest first death rate of anybody at the tournament, which is not good if you're the entry duelist. And there are just so many rounds where I was just like, what are you doing? Like, why are you throwing this round away?
Yeah.
And so I think, and I think a lot of that comes from when he's playing the Rays, where he feels, maybe it's just this is how he knows to play the Rays, or maybe he feels like he needs to sort of like really step into this Jing role where it's like you have to get the entry, and so he's like so aggressive, he's so over the top with his movement, he's like way too deep all the time. It's kind of hard to say. And so when you put him on the Omen where he has to like smoke for the team first, maybe hold out his paranoia for them, like throw some utility before he goes in, and he's like kind of stuck behind some of his teammates, then it allows some of his aim and just like his mechanics to have a role. And you know, to be fair to him, there were some good Rays rounds, but there were a lot of really bad ones too.
Yeah, I think it's him leaning into that idea of I'm joining Paper X, so I have to be super aggro. Even if he is already an aggressive player, you know, which I think he was a fairly aggressive player, but I mean, you know, no, he wasn't like any different to a lot of, you know, Pacific players in terms of his level of aggression, you know, beforehand. But I feel like particularly when he gets on Raze, he probably does feel the weight of I need to be what Jing was. But no one plays like Jing.
Yeah.
Like no one plays like Jing, right?
Right.
Jing throughout his entire career will always play the same way of I am always swinging this. I am always doing this. And so he knows. One of Jing's best skills was knowing when to come out of a smoke. Yeah. Right? Jing was insane at timing coming through a smoke. Because here's the thing, he always is peeking through that smoke. And so he got good at knowing exactly when was the right time to do it. Whereas other people don't do that. Right? Other people just haven't practiced that skill nearly as much as Jing has, because he does it every single time. So yeah, to me again, I think it just makes sense, at least for now, to put Monyet on smokes so that he can learn the culture of the team without throwing rounds away, right? Get him on a roll where, one, he looked more comfortable. You do have to say, like, he just looks like he knows Omen better, which makes sense. He played controller all of last year.
Right, I was gonna say, like, he already has more hours on that at the tier 1 level, so yeah, kind of makes sense.
So of course that's what's familiar to him right now. So of course it makes sense that he's better on it, and I think it would help him just, again, like, get that realization of just, you don't need to be super aggro like every single round, right? Play for your team and good things will happen, right? And yeah, but I mean, the same thing, I think, if we go to Paper X in terms of where they will be, I feel like probably both of us, I'm not going to speak for you, I'll speak for myself now. I feel like for Paper X going into Pacific, they'll still be fine. I don't really see a world where I'm too worried about Paper X's prospects, for instance, of making Shanghai. What about you?
Yeah, I mean, I think I mostly agree with that. I am a little worried just because of how much they were like, we really don't think we're very good. Like, we don't know what's going on. We haven't figured out anything. We have a lot of internal problems. Like, and Alex was just saying this, like, in the press conference day after day. We're having problems. We don't feel confident. We don't know what we're doing. Like, we have a lot to work on. And so that to me just is like, and I think he even said, like, things feel different. Like, replacing Jing was really difficult on the entire team, like, emotionally. And so it is really interesting. And I think we're seeing a bit more of the inconsistency from every player except for
Yeah.
Forsaken as well. Like Devi
Yeah.
was so good last year, like probably the most underrated player, certainly in the region, maybe like in the world last year in terms of his impact. And I've seen him play really poor over the last
Yeah.
couple of months.
Yeah.
Mind Freak has been super up and down. Also, something has also been kind of like absent in maybe like 30% of the maps. Like his jet
Yeah.
stats are quite bad. His Reyna stats are not good. His Gecko is actually his best performing agent right now, and it's like a very strange role that he's playing.
Yeah, it's kind of weird. Like My Freak, I think, has always been inconsistent.
Mm-hmm.
He always seems to have some very quiet maps and then some insane maps. Like that just seems to be the kind of player he is.
Yeah,
But yeah, something definitely it feels kind of weird where he will like maybe it's just misremembering what happened last year, but it felt like he was always good to be at least good, right? He
mm-hmm.
was at least good on every map, and then he would take over maps at this sometimes. This year, I definitely agree. It feels like there are maps where he's playing bad, like
Yeah,
he's having bad maps,
yeah.
and then he will still have insane maps as well. He will still go crazy, and I mean his opping was really good at this
I
tournament for
mean, the
the most
skill is
part.
still there for sure,
Yeah,
but
yeah, but there's definitely problems, and I agree. Forsaken was kind of the only one I think that like looked like good for like the Forsaken you that you know and that you expect from Paper Rex. So, but then this is the thing with this tournament as a whole. They still got third.
yeah.
They still managed to get third, and I mean, who did they beat to get to third? They obviously beat Loud. They beat Carmine Core. They beat Heretics. So it's like,
Right, they beat some good teams,
yeah, they beat
and
teams
yeah,
that like they beat pretty much everyone else you would say might have gotten that far anyway. So yeah,
but they
what do
also
you?
got dominated by GenG every time they played them, which is really interesting. Like,
Yeah, but
you know,
we'll get to GenG.
it's a very interesting place. So, I mean, will they make Shanghai? Yes, but I don't think it's going to be that easy of a road for them, if I'm being perfectly honest.
Okay.
I
Do you
think
want me to tell you their
they
group?
yeah,
So
sure.
in their group, they've got the true champions, DFM,
Okay.
DRX, RRQ, Talon, and Zeta. So I mean, you could see, DRX probably will make playoffs. RRQ are a very interesting team. If you're an RRQ fan, the hopium is through the roof because the two teams in your group finished second and third in a Masters, in the International Masters. So,
Yeah.
hey, RRQ, we're the fourth best team in the world. What do you mean? And then, depending on how you feel about Talon and Zeta as well, it could be close, but I don't see a way that PaperX don't make it. But then again, finishing first in your group, just I'm a big rules guy, this. Finishing first in your group does matter quite a lot for this
hmm
because
in
you
the
get a
splits,
bye.
you're saying?
Yeah, because you
Yeah.
get a
Okay.
bye in the playoffs, so you only need to win one game. And then finishing first in your region as well will matter a lot as well because you'll go straight to playoffs at
hmm
Shanghai if you win your region. So
Okay.
basically, you want to do like this is the thing about Sentinels. You were saying, maybe take some time off. I mean, maybe not,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
finishing top of your group important. Winning the entire region also important.
All right, buckle up, lads. You're not seeing your family, no friends. You're not going out. You're stuck in the facility for the next 6 months. We're gonna go and we're gonna win champions, and then you can live your lives. Is basically the approach this year.
Yes,
Yeah, makes
yes,
sense.
that's the way it's gonna go. Shall we move on to Gen G?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, this team is something. they're definitely something interesting. And I think both you and I had maybe some bad takes about them
Yes.
a little
Well,
bit.
this is the thing. I made a video the other day about, doing a fake apology to Sentinels because I actually secretly always believed in Sentinels and I picked them to win the event and stuff like that. And the top comment is that I actually need to apologize to Gen G, that is actually true
Yeah.
because I have consistently underrated Gen G, and it really took me until they probably until I mean I missed the first game that they played against Paper X, but everyone was saying, it was a massive stomp. So that was kind of like, oh, okay. Okay. But then when they beat Sentinels the first time, I was like, okay, wow. Wow.
hmm
I did not expect you to do that, Gen G. And I think what I underrated with Gen G was, obviously you watch their games, you can tell, like, okay, they can aim. Right? Like clearly they have very good aim.
hmm
Um but then it's not just that. Like I always, and obviously they play like they're pretty good at trading and they're pretty good at like the fundamentals and stuff like that. What I underrated about GenG, I think, is that they have good plans. Like their
Mm-hmm.
plans going into maps, I think, are generally pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
And I noticed that, for instance, they did try to change things up, like against Sentinels in the grand final on Split. They did end up losing that map, but I noticed that, like from what they were doing in the first game, they were already recognizing that Sentinels were going to change certain things. And so, for instance, GenG went to mid a lot more on Split,
Mm-hmm.
expecting that Sentinels were going to stack the sites a lot more because GenG had just been hitting the sites in the first game. So, there was good thought to what they were trying to do, and in that particular instance it didn't work, but you could tell that like they did have, a plan and
Mm-hmm.
plans. So yeah, I very much underrated GenG, and I apologize to GenG because you know what's weird? I think of all the teams, maybe I might give them the best chance of any team of making it to Shanghai with a very competitive Americas.
Mm-hmm.
I think GenG might be the most likely team to like. I mean, EDG or no, I'm not gonna say EDG. We're gonna
They're a
say
mess.
GenG.
They're a mess. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna
I
say
think I agree with
GenG
that take. I
are
think
the
I agree with
most
that
likely
take.
team.
Yeah. I mean, I also probably should apologize to them, but I'm a little bit jaded because I had all of Pacific coming at me for saying that their map veto was dog shit.
I mean, it
And
was.
I still stand by that.
Yeah, people need to calm down. I mean, what were
But
they doing picking Lotus? It was
yeah,
dog shit.
true. I have another kind of hot take,
Go on.
which is that I think that they should have won the grand finals 3-0. I think they
Yes.
absolutely completely choked Bind away. I think
Yes.
that their
I agree.
Bind was much better than Sentinels. I think they were clearly in the spot where they should have won. And
I'm
then,
just glad you're saying it so that the Sen fans don't have to come at
yeah,
me.
no, I mean,
Um,
they should have won Bind, and they legitimately choked the map because they had a bunch of rounds towards the end when I think they were up like 10-6 or 10-7. And then they had like 3 rounds in a row where they just straight up lost every aim duel. It wasn't even that their plans were bad. It wasn't even that Sentinels was out calling them. It was just literally, here's a 1v1 and Sentinels wins it. Here's a 1v1 and GenG loses it. Here's a 1v1, GenG loses it. It's just like, I was like, oh my God. Like they literally should have 3-0'd the grand finals and been the champions. And then after that, there was a little bit of the mental booming. There was a little bit more of Sentinels confidence. We're going into a decent Sentinels map. And suddenly now things are getting a little shaky. And once we got to Icebox, GenG, I think, was kind of donezo mentally, just because
yeah.
I think they probably felt like we
I think when they
probably should
lost
have
the
won
second
this.
pistol on Icebox,
Yeah,
they were already down, I think, and then they lost the second pistol, and I think you saw like, oh, that's probably it. Like
yeah,
I think you kind of tell in the way that they were playing. They just stopped playing as a team. It felt
yeah,
like they it was just random swings. We're swinging it on our own, just hoping to find a kill, I guess.
yep,
It wasn't. Yeah, I think that they got a bit mentally boomed at the end, but yeah, I do agree that on Bind, like I feel like if we replay that Bind like 10 times, that GenG would win like 6, and Sentinels would win
from
like.
that point of being up 10-6 or
Oh,
ten to
from being
seven or
up
whatever,
10-6, I was talking from 0-0.
oh,
But
okay,
if from up to 10-6, I mean, you should win. You should win 7 anyway if you're up 10-6,
yeah,
right? Like just numbers wise, you should just win.
yeah,
You should just win most games that you're up that much by. But the last round as well. I mean, I was shocked that they came back on Ascent after how
yeah,
hard they threw a Bind. I was
yeah,
shocked that they won that map because I
yeah,
was like, "There's no way you've just thrown that bad and don't care in a grand final where you've never been here before." But apparently they did. They bounced back much better than I was expecting them to. Uh, but yeah, the last round, they're in a 5v3. They've got the spike down,
yep,
and they played the like. If you were to do like a win probability based on where the players chose to play, they might have literally picked the worst positions to play. If they could have been AFK and spawn for the next 30 seconds, and I'm pretty sure that a win probability chart would give them a better chance of winning than what they actually did, which is playing outside of Hooker, right by the spike, when Sentinels can TP.
mm-hmm.
So Sentinels can actually pinch on where you are playing,
Yeah,
the literal one area of the map that like you shouldn't play. And to be fair to GenG, they learned in the next map there was a very similar round on Ascent where the spike got dropped in a bad situation, and GenG learned, and they were in a 5v3, and they just ran away from the spike, and they just because this is always been a massive pet peeve of mine. Whenever this happens, is you never, especially if you're in a 5v4, it might be a little bit different. If you're in a 5v3 and the spike is down like outside of hooker or something like that, you don't camp the spike.
Yep.
Because they are going to take time, and they are going to have, they did use it. Sentinels are going to have to use their remaining utility to pick back up the spike.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
So they use Skydog, they use a smoke. You know, they used a Viper Molly, I think, Sentinels, right?
Yep.
So they're going to do that either way. They don't know if you're camping the spike or not. Just make them take the site with no utility in a 3v5 with no time. Yep. You can't lose that round. Like, it's unlosable if you just play the sites. And then they even end up in a 3v2, and I remember saying like that Sentinels will win this round when it was a 2v3 and the spike was going down. I was like, they're gonna win this round because you could just it was just there, right? It was just so clear to see that that's probably the way it was gonna play out. And yeah, that was a tough loss for GenG, but I think overall, I mean, this is the thing as well. You know, there was the Detroit Lions finally made it to an NFC Championship earlier this year, and their coach,
for people who don't know American football, the Lions have historically been like the worst franchise ever.
The worst team,
basically.
And they made it to the semifinals basically, and they lost in the semifinals in like a game where they were in the lead, and then they lost. And their coach said like, "Hey, I told all the players like we might not be back." And it's like you don't ever think that when you lose like, you know, this kind of really close game or what, but it's true, right? Like that might have been GenG's chance. They might not win another tournament. You know, by the time we get to Shanghai, maybe we're in a different meta. You know, Fnatic are back, you know, and they're dominating everyone. You know, all of the Americas teams have improved. Like, that might have been their chance. And I don't want to say that to GenG because it feels kind of harsh, and it feels kind of like, you know.
Yeah.
I want GenG to win because, you know, they seem like a very likable team. And I really want Pacific to win a trophy because one thing I love about Valorant and the way that this game is kind of shaken out is that all the regions are competitive.
Yeah.
You know, China will get to eventually. I'm sure they'll be competitive, but you know, at least for the three main regions that started out, it has been very competitive. But the one kind of missing thing is, but Pacific has never actually won a trophy, which is still kind of sad. And this might have been their best chance. Honestly, this might have been.
I mean, they were in the grand finals, up 2-1.
Yeah.
So yeah, it definitely was the best chance that they've had.
But it might have been the best chance for Pacific, I think, because like FPX were kind of when PaperX made the first grand final, FPX were kind of like a hidden monster, right? Who were only in the lowers because they weren't playing with Sugetsu.
Right. Yeah, like, true.
They were just the best team at that tournament. Full stop.
Yeah.
You know, but they were playing with a sub for half of it, and then you know EG. I think PaperX got a little lucky to beat EG the first time in the upper final, and really EG were the better team, and I kind of, you know, showed that in the grand final of that game too. So this might have been the best chance for Pacific so far.
Okay, I do want to be positive for a minute, because we've definitely been talking as if GenG's like prospects are over and it's done for them.
Well, we have historically underrated them, so I guess let's. GenG, you are winning Masters Shanghai. Congratulations, GenG.
Okay, so there were a few things that I do want to give them props for. I mean, obviously this is a great run for them, but I think a couple of things that helped them do this was macro wise. I thought they were one of the best teams at, they would get a read on what the other team is doing, and then they would just immediately go on that read. So it's like, we think they're going to go B, they would just full stack the B site, or like, you know, 4-1 or something like that. And that's kind of an exploitable way to play the game. Now, like, teams will look at their VODs and that, and they'll have to kind of switch it up a little bit. But it was the correct way to play this tournament, which is that most teams were not running fakes. Most teams were running like pretty heavy site hit comps. I feel like, especially with, you know, like the Gecko plus KO, a lot of these comps are like revolving around kind of having like a pack of 4 players hitting a site together. And so if you just are there with all of your utility, a lot of the times you can stall them out, you can break their attack, and then your either flood retakes are really good, or you just fight them before they even get to the site and can execute. and GenG were doing that better than probably any other team as far as like making the gamble early in the round and then just trusting it. So that was a huge part of their success, in my opinion, is that they almost always just had the correct numbers to defend sites. And then on the attack side, their firepower was just giving them so many openings. And then to that point, the prospects for Karen are very, very good. Like, this guy is nuts. He's very, very good. He can play multiple different smokes, which is impressive. You know, his Omen is good, his Astra is good, his Viper is good. All of them are good. There wasn't a ton of fall off for any of those characters, which is like extremely impressive from a ranked player, basically. And on top of that, Munchkin step up. Munchkin was actually the best performing player on this team, which is incredible.
Like, I mean, he had some horrendous throws on bind.
Oh, for sure, but that's just the player he is. He
had some incredible rounds as well. Like, he was winning them a lot of rounds on his own.
Yeah,
which is crazy for an IGL as well, to be like consistent. Like, he would get a lot of 3Ks and 4Ks, it felt like.
Yeah, I mean, overall, this team has incredible amounts of skill, and all of them showed up at different moments. All of them had their own carry rounds. All of them had their own clutch rounds. I just think that their skill ceiling allows them to kind of just do certain things on the map and take fights in ways. And we're actually talking about it with in our last podcast, where we were talking about them against Loud, where I showed a clip of them just brawling Loud on Icebox, and it's like, not many teams can outbrawl Loud, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not many teams can outbrawl Paper X, but GenG was doing that consistently. They were just like, all right, you guys want to fight? Cool, we'll fight you. And if you don't want to fight, then we'll fight on the site when you go to try and plant, and we'll win both of those. So I think that this team definitely has some good prospects for this year. I do tend to agree that this was probably the best chance that they're going to have to win a title this year. And, there's always a chance that if you're relying too much on firepower, that you can fall off if people are not hitting. But like you said, I think their structure is pretty good. And as long as they kind of like continue to build on what they're doing and not let, the disappointment of this loss get to them, there's always stuff to learn from. But I will say one last thing is that Korean teams in general in this game have had a very big problem with like just that moment, right? The pressure moment. Yeah. Like, how do you overcome this? And then they just run into a wall. We saw this with DRX for like 2 years. We saw this with New Turn. They had that one good tournament and they disappeared. Like, please just don't do that, GenG. Like, for the sake of everybody who is now a fan of you guys after watching you play, just stay the path, like put in the work, and then just try and like have a short memory of this tournament being a disappointment.
Yeah. I think GenG have a big advantage going forward in that their floor is so high because their aim is so good.
Yeah.
That like in games against worse teams in Pacific, they should just be fine because they should just be able to out aim them. Like, if we're being real, if they can out aim, like as you said, like a Loud and a Paper Rex, then they can definitely out aim global. So that should just see them through to making Shanghai. And I think we both agree that they probably will make Shanghai.
Yes.
But my question to you then is, if they do make Shanghai, where do they finish?
I think I've learned my lesson. I'm gonna have a little bit of faith. I think they'll finish. I think they will make playoffs in Shanghai. I'll say that much. I don't know where they're going to go from there. That's as far as I can take.
I'm going to say they finish about 3rd, 4th. That's what I'm going to say.
I think that's fair.
Yeah, I think that's fair too. So there you go, GenG, who did kind of become a bit of a favorite of mine, kind of from a just a pure like, I had no thoughts on this team going into the year. One of the teams that I was and we were potentially the most wrong on. Coming into the year, I don't even want to know where we ranked them, but I feel like it was 8th or 9th in Pacific.
It was quite bad. Yeah, it was quite bad.
So, yeah, we have historically and consistently thought that GenG were going to fail, and eventually they did fail, but they certainly did a lot better than I think either of us were expecting. And
Yep.
now finally, we come to the team that. Shall we just quickly brush over this team?
Yeah. What is
Shall we
there to
just
talk about?
quickly? Shall we
Nobody
just
cares about
quickly,
this team.
quickly go over? Just like barely even mention it. That
Yeah.
would be funny. I
Global
mean,
esports won, right?
yes,
Or
yeah, I think so.
global?
Wait,
They
wasn't
won?
it Fnatic?
No.
Fnatic won, right? Surely.
Global dumpstered Fnatic. They played.
Oh,
They
did
played.
they?
Yeah, they played solo Viper controller on Bind and
And it confused
13-0'd
Boaster so
Fnatic.
much. Okay, if you say so.
Yeah, that's how I remember it.
Okay, let's get to them then. Sentinels win an event. It truly
Mhm.
is 2021. And you know what? I'm sure that this event win, this will keep them going for the next 3 years as well.
It worked last time.
Like last time.
It is pretty incredible that they have managed to retain so much relevancy from a single win. Because you always kind of think like, oh yeah, Sentinels was great for a long period of time, and sure they had like the first strike run, but realistically, once we got to like the Masters system, they had one good tournament, and after that, it was like, eh.
Yeah, and you know what? The first point I want to make about Sentinels is a lot of people are talking about GenG, like, oh, how were Global this bad? When they had Texture and they had Monyet, and yeah, how did they mismanage that situation so badly? I'm wondering the same thing about Sentinels. How the hell was a team with Zekken that bad? How, like, honestly, think about it. How was a team with Zekken that bad? I just want you, because like, look, you can say like, oh, it didn't work bringing in the two Brazil, but Sassy's still there, and Sassy works on this team, and Pancada's not a bad player. I don't think anyone thinks that, right? And then you got Zekken, and everyone knows how good Zekken is, and okay, Tens was adapting to a new role, whatever, right? All that, but still, how was a team with Zekken that bad last year? Answer me that.
Well, first of all,
Yes.
Enz was playing Duelist for most of that year.
I
So
mean, what?
Zekken was not the primary duelist. He was a secondary
just
duelist
think about
flex.
that. Just think about
Also, I think John Cutie is in the conversation for a top 5 player in the world right now. Like
Whoa!
regardless of his IGL status, he is incredible. He's super super good, and not to be too negative, but let's just say that maybe the previous coaching staff and IGL system was not correct. And we'll just move on from there to the positive side of things, which is that the Sentinels has regained their glory, and they looked like, I mean, it sounds so weird to say this, but I'm just gonna say it, like, they just looked like the best team. And what I mean, I'm gonna put team in quotation marks, because they were just a team. They were a team that had grinded games. They had some like rough maps, they had some rough games, but it didn't matter because they were just going to come back and they were just going to out team you in the next game. And that's just what they did. It's like, they're at no point, even when they were losing, even when they were behind, you didn't really lose faith, because you could just see that it's like they're just kind of all in it together. There was no moments where it's like, oh, this player is doing something really dumb. It was like all inside this system that, like, okay, they all kind of have each other's back. They're all kind of sticking to the plan. They have like their maps that they're good at, and they have the ability to, like, they'll rely on individual plays for sure, because that's just part of the structure they have with the two players, Tens and Zekken, kind of like carrying a lot of the weight. But it was just like the consistency level of their team was so good for the entire event, and really the entire start of this year, basically, even all the way back to kickoff.
Yeah, for me, Sentinels, they won this tournament based on like big moments and close games. Like if you look at like the maps that they actually won and lost, like the maps that they lost, they only lost really one close map, which was to Loud in the overtime Icebox. Every other map that they lost was like 13-5, 13-3, 13-5, 13-5, 13-8, 13-8. Like if you were gonna beat them on a map, it was gonna be like clear, like you're the better team, right? You're just clearly the better team. Any other time apart from that one Loud map that it was close, like Bind against Heretics, 13-11. It looks like Heretics are gonna win that map, and then Sentinels win the last 2 rounds and close it out. You know, against Calming Core, it's 11-11, and Sentinels are on a massive eco and basically only have classics. And Sentinels managed to win that round and then convert the map. Right? On Sunset, the final map against Loud, when it really mattered, map 3, it goes to overtime, and Sentinels are able to close it out, right?
Yep.
Against Paper Rex, the first map of the best of five. It goes to overtime. Lotus, OT, and again, Sentinels are able to close it out. And then against GenG as well, on Bind and Split, the two maps that were kind of close, again, Sentinels are able to find a way, on those maps to close it out. And I think that really was what got them there. I'm still getting people mentioning me on Twitter, like, oh, you said their map pool wasn't very good. I mean, they lost a map on in every game apart from one against Carmine Core.
Yeah.
So like I was right, basically, is what that's trying to tell you. You just are blind. But yeah, I think that they were just able to close out crucial moments. They just didn't panic. And we've talked about, other teams like Heretics are like the clear example, but there was definitely other teams as well.
GenG
But,
in the finals.
yeah, GenG in the final. In the crucial rounds of the game, when the game was literally on the line, they panicked. And Sentinels do not panic. And I think that, again, that's like often something you do associate with teams that kind of, have already done it, right? They've already won something, they've already been there. They feel confident in themselves that they're not going to do that, right? The pressure doesn't get to them in the big moment because they've already done it. And that's kind of interesting because, some of their players have, right? Tens has won an event, although even in Tens winning the event, you could say, but Sentinels just stomped everyone in that event. So you couldn't even, was there ever a big pressure moment for Sentinels? Because they just kind of stomped everyone in the first Reykjavik, right? They didn't lose a map.
Right.
But certainly for Sassy, Sassy's been there and done it. But then for actually the other players, you might argue like they might have been to international events, they've been in big games, but that kind of mentality was just able to carry them through, I think, everything. And I think like on Icebox, like we're talking about the GenG side of things, about how, they seemed mentally defeated in the second half. It seemed like Sentinels were mentally, they were there. They knew that this was like, we're gonna do it, right? They weren't making mistakes. They weren't giving things away at the end there to GenG. And so, yeah, I think it was, I mean, I think that they deserved to win. They went, like literally, we're talking about Loud having a bit of an easy schedule. Well, I mean, Sentinels beat Heretics, Carmine Core, Loud, GenG, and Paper Rex.
Yeah.
So, they went
beat everybody.
anyone else who you might want to argue could have won this event,
Yeah.
Sentinels beat them. So,
Yep.
yeah, I mean, it's definitely interesting. It will be very, very interesting to see how Sentinels fans and Sentinels the Twitter account handles being at the top of the world, and when they like maybe lose a game, right? Like I'm very interested to see what happens. Like for instance, if they lost the first game against 100 Thieves, that will be a very interesting thing to see. Like, I wonder what the Sentinel account on Twitter will tweet out if they like. Imagine they got stomped by 100 Thieves. What's the tweet? I kind of can't wait to see if that does happen. Not that I think it will. I think they'll beat 100 Thieves. But...
I mean, I think it's fairly telling that in the last map, it was Zelsis and John Cutie at the top of the scoreboard. I think that's pretty cool because, like you've mentioned, Ten Saucy, and then obviously Zekin kind of made a case for himself being the best player in the world at this tournament, I think. But it's Zelsis and John Cutie, like the role players, kind of like the bedrock of the team that's actually carrying them through that last map. And you could see it when they won. Like those two players had like this super long hug. Zelsis was like literally in tears, like being so happy that he'd finally accomplished this thing.
Which is a crazy story for Zelsis, really, isn't
it? Dude,
I
mean, his arc has been unreal over the last couple of years.
If he was signed as a sub,
yeah,
and was just gonna do content creation, and then he ends up winning Masters Madrid.
Yeah,
I mean that is, it's a crazy way of winning a tournament.
It really is. And yeah, I mean, just like, I think, it's easy to like point to, oh, Tens is like, he's the man, he's the brand. Zekin's like, he's the next up, he's the future. But ultimately,
Zekin is not the future, by the way. Zekin is
the present. He's the present.
Clearly the present, and
but I'm just saying, like, this is kind of like been the perception, right? Yeah. But ultimately, this was such a team effort from these guys. Like everybody played such a massive role, including the coaching staff, as far as like the game plans and just like the Kaplan timeout is now kind of up there as like, like the fraud timeout, or like any of these like really respected coaches where it's like you call the timeout, very likely that they're going to come back immediately afterwards with a big string of rounds that are won. So yeah, I mean, I guess let's move on to like what the prospects are for this team moving forward. We actually saw an interesting vlog from Fnatic. I think you watched it as well, where they basically were talking about it like that the hunger was not there for Fnatic so far this year.
Hmm.
And so I guess for Sentinels, it's such a weird thing because the pressure has to be so high to be on this
Yeah.
team just because the expectations are so massive and like the amount of shit that's being talked by the social media accounts like to back up and like clown on you if you lose. Is it possible for this team to like lose that fire after one win? I don't think so.
I mean, I don't think it's possible for this team just because of the org
Yeah.
and the fans. Like, I
Yeah.
don't think it's possible because they'll just have too many people, scolding them if they don't. Right? There's like a constant kind of pressure, I think, when the fan base is this big to perform.
Yeah.
And now that they have, and like now they've set the expectation for the rest of the year that
Right.
like if Sentinels aren't going, like forget making tournaments, right? Like making Madrid was like a big deal for
Yeah.
Sentinels. But now making Shanghai, people probably won't care, right? Because you're
No, I
expected
mean,
to do that now. I mean,
this is like
they pretty much
immediate.
have already made champs, so
This is like immediate optic levels of expectations from their fan base. It's
yes,
like they must
yes,
make grand finals every tournament at this point,
yeah,
basically.
yeah. It like yeah, anything less than like I mean, if you don't finish top three, like you're trolling, right?
Yeah.
Something has gone horribly wrong, which is kind of a different sort of pressure that I mean, tens will have faced, and maybe Sassy with Loud as well.
Hmm.
But that's a different pressure that those other three will have not been under, right? Like where now you're really under the microscope, and if you have a bad game in a big map, people might be like, oh, well, you like if you have a couple bad maps at a time, like people are going to be looking at you like, I don't know. Like for instance, that was already kind of happening to Sassy at this tournament.
Hmm.
I saw little Reddit threads and stuff about people being like, Sassy's not playing that well, right?
Yeah.
And then people would defend it, but like, oh, but he's an integral part of the team, and he's big in clutches and stuff like that. But like, if all of a sudden they stop winning, right? If they aren't actually winning as a team, and people then start having bad performances as well, this is where it can get pretty toxic pretty quick.
Yeah.
Uh, which will be interesting to see. I do still think though that again, Sentinels kind of like GenG in a way, like their core build, their kind of core of the team, like what makes them good, I feel like is something that's like quite stable,
Yeah.
right? It's something that I don't think is necessarily gonna change that much.
Right.
So
They're not relying on some weird comp. They're not relying on like
yeah,
some super up and down player performance necessarily. It's
yeah,
yeah.
like
Yeah.
it's just quite a stable core, I think, of like who they are.
Mhm.
So they still, it's not that they can't be overtaken, right? I think you could look at some of the other Americas teams and be like, oh, well, NRG maybe have more potential than Sentinels, right? To
Right.
be better than them, or, maybe Leviathan do, or, maybe Loud fix their shit and maybe even Loud do it, right? Like, you could definitely make that argument, but I
Mhm.
think certainly for maybe by the time we get to champs, maybe that will be true, right? But I think certainly for kind of the early part of this stage, maybe going into Masters Shanghai as well, I still feel like Sentinels should be on good track to make it
Mhm.
to Shanghai. I would be pretty surprised if they didn't. And
Yeah.
unless they have like mega burnout, right? Because again, they have played a lot of games and they have played a lot of maps because they don't go through the uppers, right? They're kind of like
Yeah.
in the optic vein, right?
Yeah.
Where you
Just
get
we're
knocked
gonna play
down, like
every game basically
yeah, we're gonna
possible.
play as many games as we possibly can and just
Yeah.
win. Uh, so maybe there ends up being like a bit of burnout. I don't know.
Truly unbelievable marketing by them, by the way, just because they played so many games. They were far and away the highest users of the classic and they had the most classic kills, and it gave them
And
so
now
many
it gets
opportunities to
promoted. The
advertise.
bundle's gonna get promoted. Like yeah,
Yeah.
they're gonna make imagine it. I mean, if they just had a good bundle, God,
Yeah.
imagine they could have done real numbers if they wouldn't have
If
just
if
trolled the bundle as
if
well
only
and
they
actually
had
had
the
a good
cat
one.
lady card.
Well, then it would have been GG. It would have been GG. Game over. Um, but yeah, well, let's do the same question for Sentinel. So, how confident are you at them making Masters Shanghai? 1 to 10. Give
um,
me a confidence level.
I'm just gonna say 10, honestly.
Mm, Okay.
I think that their stuff is good enough that even if teams like have all this footage to watch, I think their core is so solid. Like, here's the thing: obviously, Sentinels has some map pool problems, but they've also like trial
Oh,
by
don't tell,
fire.
don't.
Nope. Listen,
The people will disagree with you.
I don't care.
You're
People are
gonna get
wrong.
mentions onto it. Yeah,
People are
well,
wrong. People are idiots. We know this. Even though they have some map pool problems, they now have trialed some of their stuff so much that they can basically just not practice it for a while, and they can just really dive into working on Breeze, really dive into working on Icebox or
well, I
whatever
think
map.
they'll just ban Breeze. To be honest,
Probably,
I think they'll
probably.
just stop banning it
They'll just
and
continue to
rely
ban
on the
Breeze.
others.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, their Icebox. I mean, maybe they just need to work on it a little bit because they beat GenG on the map.
See,
Uh,
to me,
their Ascent
the
needs to
big
get better.
reveal, the big reveal of how, because like this is the thing, people will come at me and say, "Oh, Sen's map pool is good because they won Icebox," but Captain literally said in the interview before the GenG final, like, "I'm glad they didn't pick Icebox map 3." Like he basically admitted, like, we don't think we're good at it.
Yeah. 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 But like I said, they've already done enough, right? Where I think they can
Yeah.
kind of focus on some other stuff now, and they don't really have to work on their teamwork. They
Oh yeah.
have like so
They've
much
had enough
good
reps.
coordination.
That's for
Exactly,
sure.
exactly. So I think that will probably be enough to beat a lot of these teams that, because let's be honest, like there was a lot of flux, a lot of shuffling in the offseason for Americas, and yes, there is certainly lots of potential in Americas, but a lot of those teams are still shuffling. A lot of those teams are still super unproven, and those teams are going to have the same map pool problems that Sentinels is having without
Yeah.
all of the experience and without all of the reps that they have.
And that, to be fair to me, to go back, and again, I'm just going to make this clear to everyone. Coming into Madrid, I had concerns about every team. That was my whole shtick. And
Yep.
my one concern for Sentinels was their map pool. This was not to say that other teams had
Hater.
good map pools.
You're a hater. You
But
hate
that was my
Sentinels.
concern for them,
You're
which
preying
was
on their
completely
downfall.
valid based on everything that happened and kind of played out as being pretty true for the most part. Because they did fix their bind by changing the gecko, although their bind was still a bit shaky. They could have lost, but whatever. Right. Anyway, my one concern for Sentinels going forward, though, in terms of like making Shanghai, would be the group that they're in. Whilst it is a pretty easy group to get to playoffs for, NRG are in their group. And so I think it's possible that NRG finish ahead of Sentinels in the group and get the bye for the playoffs. That's the only thing that I think might make this difficult for Sentinels, right? That getting the bye in their group might be pretty tough. Whereas had they flipped with Loud and they're in the group with Lev, 100 Thieves, it's kind of weird where I would say they have a better chance of getting the bye in that group, and they're probably chilling. So yeah, that's the only kind of worry I would have for Sentinels, is that they might not get the bye in their group. And then from there, who knows? You have one bad day, and unlucky.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's fair. I do also want to cover one little piece of news for them that kind of got swept under the rug as, Masters Madrid was kind of like underway. And obviously everybody was hyped about, the Sentinels run and all this stuff. But they officially, I don't know if they released Pancata, but they officially have allowed him to go pursue other options and are basically like, no buyout. If you find a team that you can play on, go, essentially. And they've already signed a new sub, which is Curry, which is interesting. It's just a content creator who also can play professionally, kind of like Zelsis. So watch out, Zelsis. Coming for your job.
Yeah, they just keep doing this trick of signing a sub who's a content creator.
Yeah. But what are your thoughts on Pancata? Will he find a tier 1 team? Will he be back in the league this year? Yeah. And
he's kind of said that, I think he already had an offer, right? From
Furia, I think.
The Furia, yeah. And he kind of said he turned it down because like he had health problems and there was kind of like a miscommunication or whatever. So there's definitely a chance that he does get signed. I wouldn't be shocked to see him if, like, for instance, he signs maybe as a 6th to begin with, and then gets kind of integrated into the team and then becomes just a full-time member of the team. I could see that kind of happening. I wouldn't be surprised at that. He will be in tier 1 at some point, whether it's this year or whether it's next year. At some point he will be back in tier 1. I'm pretty sure of that, because like some of these other teams, some of the South American teams just
need help.
Yeah, basically. So yeah, I definitely think he'll be back in one form or another. I wouldn't it might not be this year, but at some point I think he will.
Yeah, I think the most likely scenario for this year would be after Shanghai. Like
Yeah.
after split one, a team is just like, our team's bad.
Hail Mary. Yeah.
Our team is bad. Let's see if we can make a run for champs at the end, basically.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's probably where I stand for him. I did see like some weird. I guess we probably shouldn't speculate too much, but there are definitely like some like Brazilian fans. You know, Brazilian fans get a little crazy with their stocking of their players and stuff like that. But there was definitely some stuff of like, well, he said he has health problems. Here's like pictures of him at a club. Like, does he actually care? Does he want it that badly anymore? Does he want to be a pro?
You can't have a life.
Yeah, exactly. So who knows?
That's tough. That's tough. Okay. Did we want to you wanted to open the floor?
Yeah, so basically one of the benefits of having a live show is that we do have this chat over here. And yes, chatters, I have seen it on the side over here a little bit. I'm not really reading it because I don't care about you guys very much. But we do have a little segment now where we're in between topics. We're going to move on and talk about some other stuff and Clove, of course. But you know what? Why don't we let you guys ask a couple of questions and we'll answer them if they're good. So do you guys have any questions? We'll pick maybe one, maybe two out of chat. And yeah, if there's anything reasonably intelligent, then maybe TMV will respond to it.
Maybe he will. Maybe he will. Maybe he won't. I mean, you never know. I mean, a lot of these people, you know, I know some of the names in the chat. You know, these people can be a bit unruly at times, but go on, pick a question. Pick any question. Get typing away.
Okay, I kind of like this one. I think
Is it how does Sen winning affect C9's legacy?
no. I was refusing to read that one. I was just thinking that the 100 Thieves question is interesting, just because now we've seen a bit of the Americas teams, and like, you know, I think people were kind of high on 100 Thieves, especially now that we've seen like the group and like how these teams, what the trajectory was, because 100 Thieves was in the group with Sentinels, obviously. So yeah, what is 100 Thieves prospects for split one, and will they make Shanghai?
Man, 100 Thieves prospects for split one. So again, they're in a group with Lev, Loud, MIBR, Fury, EG. I think they're in the harder group when it comes to like making playoffs, like competing against those teams. I think if you put 100 Thieves in the other group, they would be like automatic playoff team. And this one, is there some chance that, you know, MIBR are decent? Or, I mean, I don't personally have a lot of faith in Fury or EG, but some people might. Well, I guess we'll see. And personally, I'm not that high on Lev anymore either. I bought that bundle and I cursed them. So I think 100 Thieves could get out. I mean, I think 100 Thieves have a chance to win this group. Maybe that's crazy.
Wow.
The only problem is for all of these teams, right? Like I think most people will probably have Americas as Sentinels NRG as 1-2. So if you're one of these teams, and maybe it helps 100 Thieves that they're playing Sentinels first, you know, like maybe Sen don't have a ton of time to practice. 100 Thieves can, you know, hard anti-strat them, stuff like that, you know, with a lot of prep. I think it's possible that 100 Thieves could beat Sentinels and are then in a very good spot to win the group, because maybe no one else beats Sen or NRG.
Yeah, I could also see that happening. And I think that we would both agree that out of all the teams at kickoff, 100 Thieves was the team that desperately needed more time, because they had literally practiced with Boostio for like
I think
them
and NRG, them and NRG were like clearly like, oh, you can see it, but it's like it happens for like a brief moment, and then it's like we go back to what are we doing? So yeah, I think 100 Thieves. I mean, maybe this is just the time. Maybe just get every Clout org. Maybe this is their time. Sentinels, now 100 Thieves. Maybe this is their time. I could genuinely see it. Looking at how this might shake out. Now, can they qualify for Shanghai? Well, here's the thing: if they get the bye, their chances are very good, because you only need to win one of two games. You only need to not massively choke, and you've done it, and you get extra time to prep for that first game as well. So, yeah, you only need to not massively choke that, and then, yeah, you're in a pretty good spot. So It's going to be tough. I should also say as well, the bye is even more important this year than it was last year because the first game of playoffs is single elim, isn't it? So
Yeah. Yep.
So being first really really matters. Like because then 3 out of 4 teams make it. Like once you get a bye, you're in the top 4, and 3 out of 4 make it. So obviously your odds are just so good at that point of making it.
Yeah.
Can they do that though? It's 100 Thieves, and I just can't trust them. Is the
Can't
thing.
trust them. Can't trust them.
It's
Even with Captain America on the team now.
They are a bit of a team liquid.
No, don't even put them in the same category as that. No.
Are they not?
No, nobody's in the same category as Liquid. Let's move on to the next question.
Okay.
we're gonna take one more.
Some chance. That's what I'm gonna say.
Yeah. I like this one as well, which is were there any players that performed significantly differently than you expected? I guess like can you highlight any players from Masters Madrid that you were like super impressed by or maybe disappointed by?
Disappointed Chichu, who I put in my top 10. Definitely a disappointment for me. Surprised by, in a good way, Munchkin would be up there. I honestly, all of GenG, maybe outside of Lakia, would be up there for me. Just because, again, I mean, I thought they would maybe be like the 5th best team or the 6th best team at the tournament. So that was a big surprise in terms of them doing well. Rienz was another one for Heritage.
Yeah, that's a good shot.
Who I didn't think looked that great on the online games. You know, I mean, obviously he was playing online with like way higher ping than everyone else, so it does make some sense that like he wouldn't do as well. But
yeah,
I thought he was much better. Anyone for you?
Yeah, I think maybe I would say I would probably say I was fairly impressed with Karon. Like obviously he was really good in Pacific, and so everybody was like, I mean, people are very quick. I'll just say this in general. Analysts and just the general scene are very quick to like jump on the next up player, right? As soon as they see somebody who's performing well, they're like, this guy's it. He's the future, right? And a lot of times it doesn't work out.
Whilst you're just here, can I just say, please never, ever, 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 whenever I see someone say someone has a high clutch percentage in an event, I die a little inside.
Yeah,
I die a little inside.
Yeah.
Like you can be better at clutches than other people, and there are players who are slightly better at clutches than other people. Because like there are skills to it, right? But no one has ever like consistently across international events. No one has ever been like the best clutch percentage because guess what? It's you can't choose how if you're in a 1v2, you can't choose if your opponent's throw or not. Like if they play it well, there's nothing you can do about that, right? Or if their spam misses on the spike, you aren't in control of that shit. Clutch percentage is a almost useless stat.
Yeah, I agree. So actually, I'm gonna expand this a little bit just to kind of like the rookie class. I think was fairly impressive with Karon and Narrate. I mean, those two players, these are players that everybody had high expectations coming into the event, and oh boy, did they meet those expectations. Like both of these players, Narrate and Karon, are like, they are tier 1. They are definitely tier 1 players, and they are going to be part of the tier 1 scene for a long time.
Shin was quite good as well, I thought. Shin was another one that I think you could put in there also. So yeah. But then disappointing wise, like thinking about Kamiko, Martin was kind of on the other side of that. Where I don't think Martin had a great
Tamazi as well had a very rough
Tamazi as well, yeah.
And same kind of thing for like the Heretics players. Like they had some, bright moments, but also some disappointing ones. I was actually going to go the opposite direction. I was going to say like Devai, just because I think again, stating my point that I raised earlier about Paperex is that he's always been such a consistent rock for this team, and I thought he looked really shaky. So maybe just a little overworked in terms of like trying to keep the vibes good for this team. I think you could see it in a lot of the comps. He seemed to always be the one that's trying to like bring people together like in between the rounds and like trying to keep people focused and stuff like that. And I think maybe that affected his performance a bit. But okay, let's move on to our next section, and we'll maybe take a couple more questions later on in the stream as well. So save them. But we're gonna quickly go a little bit. TMV has introduced a a topic that I
Yeah.
somewhat disagree with, but it's a debate show, so let's debate it. Sovereign 2.0. Why Sovereign is the most mid skin in the game? TMV, defend your position.
I just think it's not very good. It's
This bundle
basically
or the Sovereign in general?
both. Sovereign. It's like I don't know. I don't think the sound is that good. I think it kind of annoys me, to be honest. The Sovereign sound, it's too like high pitched, in my opinion. And then I don't think the new bundle. The sword is kind of like the knife that they've got is like okay. Don't know if you've seen it, but the rest of it, I just think it looks kind of bad. And I just what's the one that's kind of Sentinels of Light one, right? Is like I don't like that one particularly either, but I feel like that's just a better version. Am I wrong?
Okay. Well, I think you're right about Sovereign 2.0. I don't particularly like this bundle. I think that most of the guns look not that good. However, Sovereign 1.0 is a banger. It has the best Ghost skin. It has the best Martial skin. It has one of
No.
the best Vandal skins. It was the original cool sword, which a lot of people still use,
Again, like yeah,
and
the knife is fine.
the classic is good,
No.
and the Spectre is also one of the only good Spectre skins. But
No.
the Vandal is one of the best skins, and I won't take any slander from that. Also, the
Well, you're
Ghost.
wrong. The ghost is boring. The ghost is like a bad like the best ghost skin.
Wait, I'm trolling. I'm thinking of the Forsaken Vandal, which is the original Sovereign 2.0. Wait, what was the original Sovereign bundle?
Uh it just Google it.
The
What did
Sovereign
you call it?
Sovereign bundle's trash. Throw that in the trash. Most overrated skin bundle. Agreed. Only the Ghost is good. Only the Ghost is good.
Wait, so what were you thinking of?
I'm thinking of the Forsaken, the gold skins of the Forsaken bundle, which are basically
Oh,
the
I
Sovereign
see.
skins.
Yeah, they kind of are. You're right. Yeah, this is the one with the Guardian, the Marshal, Stinger, Ghost.
Oh yeah. Okay. Well,
Um,
I like the Stinger. I like the Ghost, and Marshall has like
no, the
no good
Stinger's horrible.
skins. Marshall has like no
No,
good skins.
the
So,
Tree Marshal is good.
well, so is the Sovereign Marshall.
No, the Tree Marshal's just better. And the what's it called? The Neo Frontier one with the spinny.
That one's good.
The spin of the Marshal is sick.
That's true.
Uh,
However, I will say that if a different bundle that has copied your aesthetic is better than every piece of the bundle, then yes, you're overrated. Because Forsaken, Goated, Sovereign, Mid.
okay,
Any other
good.
thoughts on this topic?
No,
Okay. Not buying Sovereign 2.0, I assume.
no.
All right. Well, Riot is not sponsoring this podcast anytime soon, but that's okay.
Would Riot sponsor this podcast? Like, just,
I
we're
mean,
sponsored by Riot Games,
yeah.
little known indie dev company, Riot Games, and their new game,
There's always a
Valorant.
chance. There's always a chance. Okay, shall we move on to the next very big topic?
Let's do it.
Okay, so if you guys haven't heard, you have, I guess, just not been on the internet until just now. There's a new agent that is being released today, and they are a smoker, and they have some interesting abilities that we have not seen in Valorant. I feel like this has kind of been a theme, and I guess maybe Riot just every time they release a new agent, they kind of feel like they need to do this maybe at this point, which is that there's some new mechanics that have never been in the game before. So how do they interact with everything that already exists? Of course, I'm talking about Clove, the newest smokes agent that can self-revive and also place smokes while dead. So you had the opportunity to do like the early access event, not the one in LA, but you had early access. So tell me a little bit about your first impressions of this agent, and then we'll go from there.
Let me start with the fact that I think having the idea of like, is there any utility we can have? And this, I assume, how they started this design process. How could we have utility of a player who's already dead? Like, how would that impact the game? I think that is a cool idea, and I think that kind of like the playing with the abilities in that kind of different way of thinking about it, not just like, oh, here's 4 abilities, go, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like kind of like this is why I liked Gecko, right? Because it kind of played with, like it's a different kind of style, you almost might say, right, of how the agent works with the cooldowns. And I think changing this to have an agent that still does something after they die, that's a cool idea.
Mm-hmm.
Outside of that, I think the agent is pretty dull and pretty boring, and I don't like what they've done with it. I think
Mm-hmm.
that initial idea is a very cool one to build off, and like I can understand why they just thought like, oh, let's have it be smoke, because you don't want it something to be like that's crazy good, right? So having it be smokes like makes sense, right? Like smokes are kind of like they'll give you some value, but they're not necessarily going to win a round, so it's not like the biggest deal in the world necessarily, right? Like it makes sense.
Right. Imagine if it was like a recon dart coming out of nowhere, coming out of
Yes,
the sky. That
yes,
would be
that would be a
so
lot worse.
insane.
Yeah, that would be a lot worse. Kind of thing. Yeah, so I can understand like where they've gone with it, why they pick smokes, but to me, just the rest of the design of the agent, I just don't think is that interesting or inspired or that fun, to be honest. Like I really do think that like just from a design perspective, like the agent who can still do something after they die, oh they have a self res, like oh, that one must have taken you a while to cook up. Like it just feels kind of obvious, and then the decay ability it is just a bad fade seize. Like there really is no other way to describe it. It's a fade seize, but imagine that you can still move and you can still heal,
Mm-hmm.
and you can't do lineups with it like a fade seize.
It does a little
Like
bit more damage than C's does too,
it does a
right?
little bit more
Yeah.
damage, but who cares?
Right.
Like because you can't really combo it that well with other things because you can't throw it that far.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And I don't get why they did that. I don't get why they didn't just go for the Phoenix slash Fade Seize mechanic. Maybe because they thought it would be too similar to a Fade Seize if they did it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Of like it dropping down. Like you
Oh
can't go that
yeah.
far, but it drops down. But the problem is there's so many positions on maps where you throw it, but it can't go far enough to actually get like from like one on mid towards like tiles. You can't throw it all the way to short like
Mm-hmm.
in like the little choke point of short or to get into cubby. Like you can't throw it that far without being out in the open.
Mm-hmm.
So there's just so many like different positions on the map where you just can't combo it with anything. So in terms of like high level coordinated play, like you would think an ability that decays you 90 damage. You're thinking about, I can combo this with a shock dart. I can combo this with, a raise nade. I can combo this with X, Y, all these different things.
Right.
But you can't because it just doesn't go far enough, and like it is just a worse fade seize. And then the like heal ability thing is just like I pointed this out in my video today. That it's just there's too many conditions that you have to apply to it to make it good, right? Like first thing is you have to get a kill or a damaging assist to even use it, right? So that's
Mm-hmm.
one thing that you have to do, and you might say, well, that'll happen all the time. Of course, that'll happen all the time.
Does
And
the
yeah, sure.
decay activate it? Like if you don't do any damage to the player, but they get decayed by your ability?
No, it has to be a damaging assist. It's
Okay.
like
Okay.
Reyna. So yeah, you have to damage them. And then if you if you just kill them before you take damage, you're not going to use the ability because like you're not
Right.
healing anything. So it's
Right.
like okay, so that's 2 conditions you have to put onto it. And then even if you do use the ability and it does heal you enough, you can still get one tapped and the ability ended up doing nothing.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So when you put all those conditions together, like of how often you're actually going to find value from that ability, you're maybe looking at like 2 rounds in the entire game.
Mm-hmm.
So then it's like, okay, well, I've got an ability that barely does anything, right? Particularly
Right.
once you start getting at high levels. Sure, low, like ranked, like mid and low levels, that's a good ability because people won't one tap you, right? Because there will be a lot of you won't be one tapping people very often, right? So
Mm-hmm.
there will be a lot of messy gunfights where you take damage and can heal, and then in your next fight, it won't be a one tap. But obviously, once you start getting up to the higher ranks, and especially pro play, like then it's just like, well, I just don't have an ability, right? I might as well just not have this ability. So, and then
Right.
you only get one charge of them both as well. And so yeah, I'm both unimpressed. I quite like the aesthetic of the agent, but I'm disappointed in both like the way that they've gone with it from what the initial probably concept was, and I don't think it'll be very good.
Okay.
Apart from in
Interesting.
like ranked. Mid and low level ranks, very good. Top level. Why? My question is this: why do they keep the last two agents have literally been like, hey, here's some
Reina
like
clones.
Reyna clones.
Yeah.
Why the fuck do we want more Reyna clones? Like that should be the literal last thing you do. Like you want to, like that's the worst part of the game. Like
Yeah.
everyone hates Reyna Smurfs. Like that's what everyone hates about this game. Why are you adding more kind of options to? Hey, do you want to, just have everyone just run it down on their own solo? Just forget team play. Who cares about that?
Right.
Go and hit your shot. Like,
Yeah, so I mean, I haven't even gotten to play the agent in like custom or anything like that yet, but I did watch a bit of your stream. I watched some videos just because I wanted to feel somewhat informed. And at first, I kind of thought that the agent was very bad. And the more that I've thought about it, I can see a lot of use cases for it. I think in ranked, it is quite a good agent just because
yeah.
if you think about how ranked is played, like
Oh yeah. And
one of the biggest problems with playing smokes in ranked is that if you die or if your team is all dead, then a lot of times you just don't really have enough like utility that's useful to like carry around by yourself. But this agent definitely has a bit more of that sort of like solo carry potential from the smokes role, and also rewards you for taking chances where like you can continue to still smoke for your teammates if you die. I think that the point that you raised about the decay being kind of like a mid ability is definitely fair. And also the overheal. It's just kind of, so one of the things that they always talk about with Valorant is like gameplay loops, right?
Yeah.
This is a phrase that they really like to use when they do like the state of the agent, like this gameplay loop was not fun or not working correctly, so we changed stuff. And I think most of the agents have reasonably good gameplay loops. They've done a pretty good job of that stuff. I think honestly, Phoenix is like one of the best examples of like a cohesive gameplay loop, which is that he has like very close range flashes that are super good at popping to take one fight, and then he has the ultimate that allows you to like take that first engagement and win it. And like everything about the agent is about taking like one or two quick fights and then building up this ultimate that allows you to like get a little bit more reach from your positioning. And then even the wall combos pretty well with the flash, because you throw the wall, flash through it, and then fight, and everything kind of like heals. So it's just like just brawl with this agent, and then you get your ult quickly because you're brawling constantly. Like that's a cohesive gameplay loop. And even an agent like Reyna is a cohesive gameplay loop because you have this ability that lets you change the crosshairs of a person and maybe get a slight advantage on your first duel, which then allows you to get a kill, heal, dismiss, whatever. And then that kind of like builds up to the snowball, which is like, as simple as the agent is, the gameplay loop makes sense.
Yep.
With Clove, I think there's like a little bit of questions. Maybe it takes a little bit more creativity to get the full gameplay loop that makes sense, because on one hand you have smokes, and smokes are not conducive to fighting, right? They basically allow you to help your teammates take space, but not really like engage. And so then you have this overheal ability, which if you 1-to-1 it with Reyna, it's probably a little bit better than Reyna's because you don't have to have line of sight of the orb, so you can just like use it as you're running essentially, which is cool. I think the speed boost is really nice, but also you don't have like the modality of dismissing away, which is so it's kind of like a side
But
grade.
isn't that kind of an anti-gameplay loop? Like if your agent is about like you can still do stuff after you die, and here's the thing that helps you not die.
Right. And so this is the thing is like, well, Reyna has the ability to take that first duel. Clove doesn't, because like realistically, your first duel is just swinging and hopefully winning the fight, or having a teammate throw utility. And so maybe it's more of a team-oriented agent, and you just always need to keep that in mind to like to get the full gameplay loop.
People won't in ranked.
But yeah, first of all, they won't in ranked, and second of all, that seems like kind of an incomplete gameplay loop then if your agent doesn't cohesively work together, and then on top of that you have like the death revive. So I think they're kind of in this space now where they're basically just making these hybrid agents where it's like piece of this type of role, piece of this type of role, put them together, see what happens. And to me, Clove is almost basically a duelist controller where like you're supposed to be the entry fragger. You're supposed to basically like buy a stinger, decay somebody, run in, hopefully instantly melt them, and then hit your overheal and like escape. And then if you do die, at least you're forward towards the site so that your smokes will reach everywhere that they need to reach. And then once they come back up and your team has already gotten onto the site because you've taken that first entry and allowed other people to trade you, then your smokes will be back up for the post plant. So I think their role is basically to be the first one in. But you need a teammate to flash for you to actually be the first one in. So it's a little bit weird.
You know what the real problem is? They already have an agent that this idea fits better for. Like if you think about it, think about Omen's kit.
Yeah.
Think about it makes sense. Imagine if Omen could smoke after he died.
I mean, he'd be like the best character in the game.
I mean, obviously he would be the best character in the game, but just in terms of building a cohesive kit,
yeah,
right? Like the only thing you would probably need to change with Omen to make it fully cohesive is change his smokes to be more like brims, or like cloves, right? Where you just tap it down instantly and go. But then TPing in, having a flash, like having an ult to go super deep.
Yeah.
Like these are all like things that make sense of like you're gonna go in and you're gonna die pretty early on, and then then you can still smoke after for the team. It makes more sense for Omen, and obviously the theme of Omen as well. It makes more sense for Omen than I think it does for Clove, and I think that's that's probably the problem that they ran into, is that for this idea they had already designed the agent that fits the idea basically, and so they've ended up with an agent that I just feel like I don't know. I'm not that excited for the agent. I'll be honest. Like even for most agents that come out, even ISO and Deadlock, right? I was kind of like, well, I'm still interested to see what people can do, right? I'm still interested to see like how it's going to play out, and I am interested with Clove to see like, there's definitely going to be some funny moments. You're just sitting on B, smoking yourself off, whilst everything else is going on towards A. That'll be a funny moment, right? Just
because like you died somewhere and and the fight is happening somewhere else.
Everything else is happening everywhere else. And you're like, guys, I'm smoking B. Hey, guys, I smoked B.
Yeah. Yeah.
That will be funny. But I am interested to see like how people can make that work. But at the same time, I just feel like, I don't know. I feel like clearly at some point in the design process, where they were probably designing these agents 2 years ago, maybe even a bit before that, the last 3 agents I think have all been very simple, right? They've all been like, Deadlock is like, hey, we want a Sentinel where you don't have to have a setup necessarily, you can just kind of do it on the fly, right? Like, oh, just put this here, put that there, boom, oh, throw that there, I'm done. Right, like I don't have to think about, oh, my camera needs to be 2 pixels higher to see this over the Viper wall, and my trip needs, where's that line up of the trip, right? That's what they said when they brought out Deadlock. Then we get ISO, who is literally just like, just hit a head, stupid, and get a shield. I'll like just aim, literally just aim. And then now you've got Clove, who I feel like in a similar way is just like, just put your smokes down, just have a fight. If you win it, good. If you don't, doesn't matter. You can still smoke, right? Like, just very, very simple. And to me, that's just, it's the last 3 agents have just not been interesting, in my opinion. Like they just aren't interesting agents, And you compare that to like if an agent like Astra came out now, like all the things that going on in your head, like, oh, you've got this recall smoke and it creates a bit of a smoke for a second. Like you've got this like kind of different game of star management. You're on this different map, but you can smoke anywhere. You can do all this stuff across the map. Like that's like, whoa, think of all the possibilities that you could do with this agent, right? All the combos you can do with the Astra suck and all this kind of stuff. And then I don't know, I'm just a bit underwhelmed, I guess, that it feels like at some point that like when they were designing this agent, there was a clear pull of like, hey guys, I think we need more simple agents in the game. It clearly seems like that was something that was said, and this is what's come out of it. And I think this is just the wrong time to do it, as we're getting more and more complex. Like we've hit the kind of, these agents needed to come out in like 2021, early 22, right? For how they were going to work. And unfortunately, they've come out in 2024 where the game has already kind of, we're kind of past that. We're past simple agents at this point. People have got good at the game. Most people who play Valorant now aren't new players.
Yeah. I mean, I think I disagree a little bit with your Deadlock take. I think Deadlock is actually a fairly complex agent because
I love Deadlock.
Well, I just think that what she actually does is a very unique thing, which is that she basically like allows you to place breach traps anywhere on the map. So it's like you have an extra agent on your team that you get to use in like very limited ways. And I think that's very cool. And I think the mini game of the wall is also very interesting and unique. I do agree that ISO is like insanely simple. Like, what is this agent? He needs to be reworked because he's too simple and too bad. I think this agent, it almost feels like this agent was half designed, shelved, and then some other team came in and finished the agent almost.
Yeah.
Because
yeah, like as if this was like when they were initially designing Omen, they had this idea. They're like,
yeah,
I'm not quite sure that works. Let's shelve
yeah,
it and try it some other time, and then they brought it back.
yeah. I will say, I think if you are going to play this agent on attack, it makes sense to have it in like a dual smokes comp. You're running in with your team. You're kind of the one that's entering for maybe your more important characters that trade out better. Like you run in first with a Reyna Lear, and then the Reyna actually trades because the Reyna is the one that's actually going to stub all the game, or like, you know, a KO or something follows you, or Gecko, whatever. And so I think that's basically how you just play this agent on attack. On defense, I think it is fairly interesting that, you know, one of the jobs that smokes players have is that they generally anchor sites. You know, Viper's very good at this, Omen's pretty good at it, Astra's pretty good at it. And I think that Clove is actually quite good at it too, because you place the smokes initially, and even though you don't have like necessarily the same stalling tools as some of these other agents do, if you can time your decay correctly, which makes it a little bit hard to play, right? Because you have one shot. It's not like a molly that sits there and stalls for a while. Yeah. It's like you have to hit them as they're coming out, which means that if you get faked at all, like rip. But, you know.
Yeah, that's I think the problem.
If you can time your decay correctly, you can mow them down really very, very easily. Mm-hmm. And also you're a little bit incentivized to just do the crazy plays of like sticking on site when every other smoke should probably be falling off the site, because it doesn't matter if you die. So you should stay on site when everybody else would be leaving, because it doesn't matter. So you
know, this is a thing I think this is something a lot of people are going to say, the what you just said, and I disagree. Because
really?
This is the wingman planting trap. Wingman planting is like a tiny added little benefit that you should, you know, do when it's convenient and not do when you're just gonna in the spike away, right? But everyone did it anyway, right? Mm-hmm. The you know what's better than like, oh, you should stay on the site and just you know, if you die, whatever.
Having a fifth player alive?
Having a fifth player alive is quite important to still be shooting back. Like, I get it, you still got smokes, but the way that I was thinking about it was like, imagine you're in this scenario, right? You've got a Killjoy is... If your Killjoy dies on site, right? So they enter onto the site, your Killjoy is anchoring alone, and the Killjoy dies. So now you're in let's even say the Killjoy gets one, right? You're in a 4v4 retake, you have smokes, right? Mm-hmm. You're like, okay, it's not great. You'd rather not be in like 4v4 retake. You're still probably, depending on the site, but you're probably not favored, right? Imagine the scenario with Clove is, let's say that Clove gets a kill anchoring the site. Your Killjoy is on the other side of the map, and they put down their utility, and they haven't got any value from it, so they just have to rotate. You still have smokes. It's still the same situation, basically. You know, where your Killjoy just isn't participating that much in terms of utility for the retake. Yeah. But you still have smokes. But that's still not, like, it's still not great, right? You're still in a 4v4 retake when you would rather not be. And as you said, for me, like, the anchor potential, like you said, you have to time that thing correctly. But even if you do time that thing correctly, it's not buying you that much time, I don't think, because they might just delay the like 2 seconds before they get their health back up. And, you know, they're not flashed, they're not stunned. There's nothing visually different or audio different on their screen. So They can, you know, still hear and see everything as they normally would. And, you know, even if they do sprint at you and they're decayed, it still might be tough for you if they have good spacing and whatnot, or, you know, if you're against a Jet who's smoking and you're spamming or whatever, you know, if they've got good flashes and they've got good stuns and, you know, you get caught by it, you're still going to be in trouble. Whereas like a Brim Molly or a Viper Molly, you know, you always want to, you know, time that like just before they're about to come in, and that will buy you 5 seconds, right? Like, that's just the way it works, like, because people just won't run through it. Even though there probably is a case that you should just run through it in some instances, right? But unless there's no time left, people never will. And so you always know it's going to be a delay. Whereas with this, I just don't think even though in practicality it is almost doing the same thing as a molly, right? Like your health is lower.
Right.
I think that just the way that it feels to have it, like it's not as long as a molly, it doesn't last as long, and you have to, like, if your molly is a second early, it doesn't matter, right?
Right.
It doesn't
Yeah.
matter as long
The
as you're a bit
window of
early, it doesn't
opportunity to
matter.
get value from this
Yeah,
spell is very, very low. I will say that.
yeah.
I,
So
what
I don't know.
one counterpoint to you. I know that you've
Come on.
played TCGs in the past. Like you
I
understand
have.
card game theory.
I do.
And there is a concept of like going 1-for-1 with a card,
Yep.
and 2-for-1
Yep.
tends to be very valuable, right?
Yes.
So it's like if you play one card and it kills 2 opponent creatures, for example, then that's a very good
Good.
spell.
Mm-hmm.
And in this case, you have potentially the ability to go half for one as somebody
Yes.
comes onto the site, right? So it's like
Yeah.
if you can just guarantee that you get 1 kill, you come out ahead in that trade because you still have
Yeah.
half of an agent, which is pretty good.
Yes. Yes, I do understand, and yeah, that is the kind of like good case for it. But then again, like for me, I'm looking at another problem that Clove is going to have right now is that I'm looking at a controller class that has 2 agents who are clearly very, very strong.
Yeah.
And so it's like, why would you replace them on a majority of maps? Because here's the thing, you kind of said like Clove with the restriction as well in terms of the, you know, the like you can't smoke that far away, right? Like if you're defending A on Ascent, you can't smoke on B.
Yeah.
Right? So you kind of feel like, oh, we need another control. So there's that kind of thing as well, you know, again about card games, right? Like, oh, we're putting this card in our deck, but that means that I have to put 2 other different cards in my deck as well. Right?
Yeah.
That's a cost.
That's a build around in TCG terms,
yes,
right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So then we're changing everything, and it's like, well, you might not want to change everything, right? Like on a map like Ascent, right? You might just feel like, well, why not just play the default comp with Omen? If I put in Clove, then I have to put in Viper, and that means that I have to change this, and then I'm maybe not playing that, and everything.
Right.
You're just playing a completely different comp at that point.
Yeah, and so let's move on to talk about the overall meta and where Clove might fit in. But I do want to say one last thing, just about the agent specifically, which is that maybe I know we said that they've probably been in development for the last couple of years. That seems the most likely scenario. But some part of me is like a little bit curious of whether Riot was like, we kind of just need an agent that will make people play this role in ranked, like just for the health of the game overall. Let's just put out an agent that rewards you for picking and playing this role in ranked because you're not punished for picking and playing this role in ranked. And maybe they just put
if
it out
ISO
because,
didn't come out and Clove would have just come out, I would have no problem.
Right, but it's just 3 in a row that like
but and then it's 2 in a row that are like
kind of the
just
same
like ranked-ish agents for me. So it's like, you know, it's like
right. Yeah,
like,
I feel that. Okay, so
then we've got Yoru and Astra coming out in 2021 or whatever.
Yeah, crazy agents comparatively. Yeah. So okay, I mean let's talk about it. Obviously, Viper, not even the elephant in the room at this point. It's just Viper is Valorant at this point.
Well, Viper is the room.
Viper is the room. We're all playing in her pit. She's decaying the game, or is she? Because honestly, the game, it feels like the meta is still relatively open. Teams are trying out and playing different stuff, but Viper had a massive pick rate at Madrid, massive pick rate in every region in kickoff. There are nerfs coming. Everybody knows this. Omen is the second most picked agent, which is crazy. That's 2 smokes at the top, and I think we also talked about it in our last episode that Omen isn't really an agent that you can kind of nerf at this point.
Not easy to nerf, certainly.
And so the meta is sort of settled with those 2 as the most important agents to play. One, because he's so versatile that he just kind of goes into any comp that you're playing. And the other one is that she's just overpowered and everybody knows it. So you have to play her. So where do you think we go from here? Viper gets nerfed. We don't really know what that's going to look like. It's probably going to have something to do with either her decay, her molly's smoke duration. Something is going to
be anything. It could be anything.
It could be anything.
Almost apart from the ult, everything could be nerfed.
Yeah. After she's nerfed, do you think we stay in a dual smokes meta? How does that, maybe integrate Clove? Can Clove just slot into any current comps that are sort of like default comps on a map? What's your outlook for Clove in 2024?
Oof, my outlook for Clove. I mean, See, Viper is a weird one, and it's funny. We talked with MBS and Brody as well, and I kind of brought up this point that like compared to like Chamber, when
Hmm.
Chamber was like the meta, right? Like no one seems that bothered by it, and I think one reason that people aren't that bothered by it is because Viper's existence doesn't necessarily bring anyone else down because Viper kind of has her own role.
Right.
Um,
Well, she kind of destroys the Sentinels, like the sages and deadlocks and
oh yeah,
killjoys
yeah.
even and stuff like that.
I mean, but like you still see a lot of like Viper with Killjoy on certain maps, you know, like on
Yeah.
Icebox, on Lotus. Like it's not necessarily like a death sentence for that agent, right? Or for I don't think it's a death like you know if for instance you know like when Chamber was meta, no one played Cypher and Killjoy.
Right.
Like
True.
no one played those agents, and maybe you could make the argument that that's true for Deadlock and Sage if you wanted to.
Yeah.
Um, I just think those agents, just the kind of agent that they are, people just don't have a lot of faith in those kind of agents in general, or find it harder to maybe find value from them.
Hmm.
Uh, so I feel like the existence of Viper doesn't necessarily bring anyone down, but if they will nerf Viper. Now I think it might take longer than people maybe think because Riot said in their last thing that they're not gonna nerf it as much. Um,
Right.
so
Their
or
approach is going
balance
to be
change as
less
much.
heavy-handed this season, is what they said. Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we could end up. It might not even be until after champs. Right? They could just wait till champs. They could just say we're not
God
balancing
help
agents.
us if
That actually
that's
could
the
happen.
case.
It could actually happen. If that
Oh.
did happen, now I don't think that that will happen because Viper is such an extreme outlier, and it's not just the pick rates; it's the win rates as well,
Yeah.
right? If the win rates stay really high and the pick rates are also really high, like it's so obvious that you must do something, right? You must, even if it's not considered like you know the worst thing in the world to play against, like Chamber was or whatever.
Right.
So they will change Viper at some point. At that point, I wouldn't necessarily think Clove is the automatic. I actually would think more Harbor is kind
Yeah.
of you know, more of a one-to-one that maybe people would try and cook up some really interesting like lurking harbor walls or something, right? Like little
Mhm.
walls to just threaten consistently throughout the round. Like, oh, we could be doing this, we could be doing that. The one problem with that idea, I think, would be that obviously Harbor's defense side isn't as good as Viper's, and
Yeah, I
that
think
that
Astra's actually the closer analog because
yeah,
she's much better
and
on defense and has like the ability to lurk pretty well. But
yeah, oh yeah,
yeah.
or maybe Astra as well. But yeah, I don't think that Clove would necessarily be like. I think Clove needs an Omen nerf. Is what Clove needs. Um, I think that that would be better for Clove in general. Um, but like, as we kind of said, I think nerfing Omen is pretty hard because to me it's kind of like, what do you nerf the Flash? That's like, and then how do you nerf the Flash to not make it useless? Like it feels kind of
Yeah.
that's a tough one to kind of
When they slowed it down, everyone's like, this is a terrible ability now, and it's still just
yeah.
like the most useful ability.
Yeah, yeah. I honestly like, other than making it like you know, like really thin or something. I don't know. It would be
That would
funny to see
suck.
Omen do like a little tiny, like a kind of ISO like level. You know what I mean? Like with the
Right.
vulnerable, like that. He just throws that little tiny one that just like spins really fast. That would be very funny to see. But other than doing something like that, which I'm not sure they would want to do, yeah, that's kind of tough to nerf Omen because it's not like his ult is good. I mean, you can't how are you gonna nerf the smokes? Like the smokes, and then the
I mean,
TPs
if
are
they
like
make them travel slow again, I will
yeah,
be so pissed because that made him so clunky to play. It was
yeah. I think
miserable.
that yeah, like yeah, because you or they could make the TP really slow again. That would be
No,
funny
no,
at the
no.
very
I mean,
least. That would be
the
funny.
thing is, I think Omen is like the perfect agent. I don't think he's overpowered. I think he's just very
You
balanced.
think that he's the goal?
I think so. I think that
So
he's like,
you would buff everyone else essentially to get
yes,
him.
I think they need to stop nerfing stuff and they need to bring the power level up because
Yeah.
I think that's one of the big problems with a game like this where you can either go two directions, right? If stuff is weak, you can either buff it or you can nerf the stuff that's really good.
Yeah.
And I think if you have sort of like a weak baseline and you try to nerf stuff down to that weak baseline, you end up with like a very milk toast kind of game where everything is just like kind of like shitty versions of everything else.
Yeah.
Whereas if you go in the opposite direction and you have stuff that's like really broken and you're like, okay, well, how do we make the other stuff that's really bad also kind of broken? Then you can actually compete at like differing kind of angles of how to attack stuff. But if every agent just has like, well, they've got like this kind of like mid flash and these like smokes that are just kind of the same.
But I
and
feel
all
like
their
they've
abilities
been,
are just the same. It's just like,
yeah,
it's boring, right? So make everything like kind of like a crazy version of like I literally think that they should like revert all of the stage nerfs. I
yeah,
think
they
that
could do that.
they should revert um some of the other nerfs that they've done on God. I mean they could literally, aside from giving Chamber the 2 TPs, they could like fully just make him back to how he was, I think, and he would be
Yeah,
fine. They've already kind of done that almost at this point.
like
I
getting.
think that the
Don't
only thing
give
I
Jet the instant dash back.
no 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 no
Don't.
no no no. I also think that Jet is in a place where she is like basically where you're supposed to be as an agent.
Yeah, I
Um,
think that's true.
and so I think they really just need to like figure out how to make an agent like Brim like
Good.
good. I mean, well, honestly, Brim is pretty good. He's just like he's only good on a couple of maps, and that's fine, right?
Yeah.
I think that's one thing. So
But
I
I
think
think the Brim could be better. I agree
yeah
with what you're saying, but I do think in general we have seen that they have gone the opposite way of what you're talking about. They have in general, with all the ult point increases that we've seen throughout. Like
yeah
it was a clear decision, and with like when Sky had 3 flashes and Breach had 3 flashes, like it was a clear design direction that they wanted to push the game into, you know, let's give everyone less utility. Let's
yeah
make everything worse across the board.
yeah
Probably because I would guess in their playtest that once they started getting so many agents, they were like, hold on a second. We already see like with Harbor Viper stuff, you can only imagine that if they ever did a playtest with Harbor and Viper together, and they've got Sky with 3 flashes, and it just becomes like way too much. You can understand that that's why they wanted to do it. But I think particularly with the controller class, if we focus on that, I think you're right. Like, is Omen that much better than, I don't know, or like that much more OP than like a Fade Sova KO, whatever initiator you want to do, right? Or is it just that you always have to play a smokes, and
yeah.
so Omen always gets picked because you always have to pick the smokes, and Omen's the best smokes. I think that that's a fair point to make, and I agree.
I don't even
Like
think he's the best smokes. Like he doesn't do anything like way better than any of the other smokes. Viper is a much better anchor. I would say Harbor is much better on attack because his abilities are really good for initiating like his ult and going in. I think that Brimstone is a much better post plant and kind of stall agent than Omen is. But Omen just does a little bit of everything. He can enter, he can smoke across the map, he has refreshable smokes, he can be an anchor because he has like the paranoia. So you can just do everything like relatively well, and that's why he just gets played all the time.
Yeah. But I think that that's the thing that you could give. Yeah, it doesn't have to be like, you could give Brim the second stim back or like change his
Yeah.
stim to make it a bit better. You could. One idea that I thought would be cool is like, what if the Astra recall star, like the recharge time is like way lower,
Yeah.
right?
I think she would
Like,
be so fun to play at that point.
yeah, so you could just constantly be like recalling, like, oh, recall here, recall that. It's like Gecko, it's like 10 seconds,
Yeah.
it's like recall, 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 like, and you're just creating little pressure across the map all the time. Like that would be like that. Those kind of buffs that aren't necessarily like, like crazy, but just like, just
Right.
give them something a bit more, and even psychologically, just give a little bit more. I think.
Yeah,
would
we're not talking about taking Brim's ult and making it the size of Harbor's ult. Like that would
that would be sick though. To be fair, that would be sick.
That would be too much. But I mean, give his stim beacon, give him 2 stims, and make them like heal 50 health or something like that. Like that would be. It sounds like pretty powerful because it's a pretty big change, but it would make him like cool as fuck to play, right? I think that's the biggest problem is that none of the agents feel particularly cool as fuck to play. Like Yoru is insane and he's very fun to play, but very few other agents feel like that anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's like be cooler.
There's like very few power fantasies. This is like kind of like a weird psychological thing, but when you have like a champion or like a hero type game, like the power fantasy of the character is that like you can do cool, crazy shit that nobody else can do. And if you have high skill with that, then you can like exert a certain type of like impact on the game. And right now, I feel like there's like Viper can do that, Yoru can do that, good KOs can do that. Gecko can do that now. And basically no other agents.
I do love sitting when people
Raze.
run into your Cypher setup. That is a very good feeling.
Yes. Yeah, I think Cypher's in a pretty good spot because Cypher's one of those characters where he's really good in certain situations and he can do a couple things incredibly well, but there's already counter stamina in the game. He can get suppressed and then he's trash. Yoru can teleport past his stuff. Like sometimes your setups are bad and so you can just get countered. So he's really good at stopping stuff and holding map control, but he's also counterable. Whereas, you know, some of the other agents, they just do everything at a mediocre level, or you have an agent like Viper who has like almost no weaknesses currently.
Yes, so you're saying sharpen the agents.
Sharpen
Make
the
them
agents.
sharpen the agents. That's another Riot thing that they love to talk about, being sharp.
Sharp.
And that's actually a good question about Clove, I think. Is Clove that sharp as an agent? And I would say maybe not. You know, I just feel like just kind of a bunch of like just a bunch of stuff, you know, that just happens, and it's like cool, whatever. Also, what do you think about the Clove ult? Because I kind of washed over it, but just quickly. Because for me, the Clove ult, like, again, it's very situational.
Yeah.
You know, there'll be certain times where you die and it's like, well, no, it's a 1v4, so I'm not gonna ult. And there's other times, you know, where you'll die and it's like, oh, I'm gonna die if I ult here. You know, they'll just kill me for sure. And then you know, like I kind of brought up in my video today, there'll be that it will definitely happen somewhat often that you get your ult online for a round, and then you don't die for the next 2-3 rounds. Your team wins the rounds.
You can't even use it. Yeah.
You can't use it, and so you only get one ult that half because you literally can't use it for 2-3 rounds, and so.
Yeah.
And there's an interesting thing I don't know if you saw, but I don't know if this is a bug or not. But if you die in a 1v1, you can't use it. If you die in a 1v1, but the spike is planted and you're on attack, you can use it. But if it's a 1v1 and you're on defense with the spike planted, you can't use it. I don't know. Don't know if that's intended or if that was a bug, but that is how it worked. Yeah.
Weird. Yeah, I mean, I think as far as the ult goes, I think I would just rather have a Phoenix ult, which is kind of like a similar type of thing, and I would rather have a KO ult because again, it's like it's kind of like a way for you to run in and die, but the KO ult is still pulsing, it's still suppressing stuff. And then I would also still rather have Arena ult, which is not really the same thing, but it kind of is the same thing because it's like an escape and also a way to like disengage. But that one allows you like crazy snowball. Right, you can go invisible, you can reposition, like you get full heal every time. You have the stim as well. Yeah, I kind of feel like the ult is like, it's almost like the real value is in these big team fights where nobody has any fucking idea what's going on, and then Clove gets killed, and then they're like, okay, and now I'm over here and killing you, and you thought I was dead, but like everybody just lost track of what's going on, you know?
Yeah, because that's the thing. Like, if let's say you're on Ascent, we're doing an A hit, the defensive omen swings, your Clove dies, we've got ult, like then your Clove ults, you take the site, but everyone just runs away, and because you have a timer. So there's no reason to not take the time. And then you're just in you took the space, but now you're in a 4v5, right? You have actually lost a player. Sure, you got the space, but it's not like a Phoenix ult where you Phoenix ult and everyone runs away and you get the space and you're still in a 5v5.
And you're back with your team in a safe spot. And
now you're just in a 4v5. And so I do think that like for post plants and retakes where like they have a time pressure, right? Yeah. So they can't just run away from you because they don't have time to do that. You know, then it's good, right? And like you say, if there's a crazy team fight and, you know, you get it off and you're like straight in and, you know, they can't keep track of everything. They can't keep track of like where you are to kill you straight away. Yeah, those kind of situations will be good. But again, it's that situationality basically of like a couple things have to be true to get good value from it.
Yeah.
You know, like you have to tick a couple boxes before you can get good value from it. And so it's like, is that good? I don't know, you know, because when I press the KO ult button, I just press it and good things happen.
Right. Yeah. That's true. I mean, I think realistically this agent is actually quite healthy for ranked just because it's going to make people, it just gives people an excuse to play smokes.
Yes.
Yeah. And I think it's probably going to be okay in competitive. I think the smokes after death is very powerful, and I do think that underrating it is a mistake, but I am not super impressed with the rest of the kit, and so I think it's going to be a little hard to find space in the meta.
Yes, I think without some changes to the controller roles in general, I think we could be in a struggle. I mean, I really wanted that thing to take someone down to 1 HP. Because at 1
Yeah.
HP, like there's a ton of things you can do, but
That's so
60,
strong though.
I know, but you only get one of them and it doesn't go that far. So I was like, huh.
Yeah.
But at 60, it's like, someone said that like the first part of a raise nade max does 50. So you can't even,
All right. Here's what
you
they
know.
need to do.
It's like,
This is what they should do with Clove. Delete Reyna.
well, that would just be good for the game. I mean,
Remove Clove's Decay Orb.
give her the Reina.
Give them the Leer.
Oh, you want the Leer? Oh, okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
And now you have a complete agent because it can enter for itself, right?
Yeah.
And then it is rewarded for going in first. And it actually can go in first without help from a teammate.
I think you're cooking. I think deleting Reina is the smartest thing you've ever said.
Well, we'll see. I mean, very low chance that we see any Clove played in Split 1 because teams are already cooking. They're already getting ready. There's no time to prep.
And Omen is good.
And Omen is good. So I guess, chat, this will be our second spot where you can submit a couple of questions. We'll take a couple of questions to close out the show about anything. And yeah, put them in chat.
Yeah. Ask us not anything. Do something. Ask something clever. Yeah. Or interesting. Yes. Make us think for once. For once in our lives. What would you ask if you were in this spot?
I would say, if you had to pick an animal that would win a fight against all other animals.
That's a good question. Everyone was like wanted to be a part of the. I had people coming up to me being like, "Oh, you didn't ask me. You didn't ask me about the animals." So, it clearly was a good question.
Okay, so here's a good one. Staying on the agent perspective, what would be an agent that we would like to see? Like, what does the game need, I guess? Because I don't know if have you watched the Anders video where he's talking about Viper being a problem and like kind of like what the game needs. So I guess if you had to design an agent that you think the game kind of desperately needs to have, not just what would be like a cool agent to have, but like what would actually bring the game into like a better space?
Oh man, that's a tough one. I think if I'm looking at different classes, I personally think I think redesigning Sage and Deadlock to be almost their own class would be a good decision. And like changing their signatures to be the slow orb and the gravnet and having them come back maybe on like a 60-second timer or something like that, right? I think that those kind of things, that would be an interesting way of taking the game, and I think that would open up space for more things in the game too. But in terms of new stuff, I think that there's definitely space within the Sentinel class to create something I think a bit different, right? Like you've got Chamber kind of off on his own, then you've got Sage and Deadlock kind of in their little pocket of whatever they're doing, and then you've got Cypher and Killjoy who are kind of just in their pocket. I think that there is definitely a space for a more proactive, I guess, Sentinel. That isn't like full duelist like Chamber, but it's like I don't exactly know how they would do it, right? But kind of like I guess the Sage Slow or a Gravnet would be like a good starting point, right? Like, but what if we had, like abilities like that were kind of the basis, right? Like, because a Gravnet or a Sage Slow you can throw obviously as like a defensive, no, you're not coming in, but you can also do it as like a proactive, like, like
deny the angle so you can take the space.
Yeah, or I'm comboing this with like a Raise Nade or whatever, right?
Right.
I think it would be interesting if there was a Sentinel agent like that maybe played on that a little bit more. Or maybe even played on, again, I like the kind of like Gecko cooldown times. One thing you don't really see with Sentinels is, they do have a 45-second cooldown. But all of the signature abilities for the Sentinels are all kind of like, you just have your Cypher Cam up and you just sit there. Right, and then you often won't get a second Cypher Cam because it sits there for half the round, so it doesn't get destroyed. Like having a proactive Sentinel refresh ability that you could then use, and then 45 seconds later you'll get again. I think that that's a space that could be explored. That could like be a very different Sentinel to what we've got. That might be a bit more fun as well. You know, if you do like being a bit more like aggressive or something, you know, that could be something that I think is pretty interesting.
Yeah, I think that's kind of an interesting idea. Um, I mean, there's kind of this theme of like hybridization of the roles
Yeah.
at this point, where I guess the one that we don't really have is like a smoke with recon, but that's probably too much, right?
Smoke with Recon goes hard. That's the best agent ever. That is very strong.
That's probably too much. I think probably what I would like to see is something that is a bit more kind of like a breach style initiator agent, like
I was just thinking that, like
a
Breach
little bit
cross the
more of
Astra.
like, yeah, of like a teammate kind of combo style agent that's like really good at enabling plays, but maybe a bit more defensive minded than a breach. Because I think one thing that we're kind of trending towards right now with a lot of the agent designs is like aggression. Just overall, I feel like a lot of the agents are good at like moving forward, taking space, kind of just explosive stuff. And I feel like ever since we had like the really hardcore Viper, Astra Sage meta where it was like hard to get into sites and stuff like that, I feel like we're never going back there at this point because it's too easy to just execute, right? It's too easy to just bombard a site with utility and just like win the fight that way. And so I kind of wish that we did have an option to slow the game down a little bit and like really stuff an attack sometimes, which I think is a little bit hard to do right now.
Yeah, yeah, I could see that. I'm thinking of an agent that is like Astra cross with Breach. That ult is just like artillery. They just fire across the map, just boom, 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 boom.
Just a gunner.
Yeah,
Like,
just a
yeah,
got a boom, 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 and just like just
call in an
massive,
airstrike.
massive balls. Yeah, airstrike comes in. It's like just that would be quite funny. I think to have an agent like that. Uh, and yeah, I think things like that. Do we want to take another question?
Yeah, let's do one more. Do you see one? Do you have the chat open?
Oh, I mean, let's stick instead of agents. Let's go to maps. What would be an interesting map design for Valorant? For example, a map that contains fractures features with Lotus 3 sites. I don't even know how that would work. Like a
Oh
hexagon
Jesus.
map.
I'm going in the opposite direction. I kind of want like a nice, like simple, honest Valorant map at this point. I feel
You
like,
want a normal one?
yeah. I mean, I guess Sunset maybe is that
Yeah,
already.
yeah.
But yeah, I think it would be kind of nice to just have like,
You want a scent but flipped.
yeah, exactly. Just flip the sites and we'll call it good. I don't know. I think I definitely don't want another three site map for a long time. Like we have two. They're both relatively good maps, like as
Yeah.
far as stuff goes. Um, I think it would actually be kind of nice to have a map that's like very imbalanced sidewise.
Hmm.
I think a lot of the maps right now are like fairly 50-50, you know.
An icebox fan, eh?
Well, you know, if we just look at the Masters Madrid, sure, we have like 5% differences. You know, Lotus was a 55% attack, 45% defense. Split was 55% defense, 45% attack. But these are fairly small sample sizes. I think it would be really interesting to have a map that's like 60-40. Just baseline is the 60-40 map. And then from there, you have to then figure out like, okay, how do we tailor comps to this? Do we lean into the defensive side and just hopefully win like 10 rounds on average on this? Or do we try and like counteract that part of the map and like become a very good attack side on this, which is like 5 or 6 rounds and that's enough, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, I think that could be interesting. I'm thinking like there's a couple things I'm thinking will we get a Valorant map? Do you think that's like two floors? Like you have to you start as the attackers on the lower floor and you have to plant upstairs or something. Do you think we'll get something like that? That could be
Yeah. I mean, it might
quite
even be the
interesting.
next map. There, I don't know.
Yeah,
You saw the leaks and there was like there's like a cavern and there's Sage like in a cavern. That's like the leak card, you know. There's always like
yeah,
the card. And then there was like the random like data mined thing where there was like people were like, oh, is this the new DM map? And there's very clearly like an A like on the
yeah,
top part of, so it's like maybe it's like a two
yeah.
site
That
cavern
would be
map.
kind of interesting. Like inside a building, like a Kingdom Factory building or something. You have to
Yeah.
scale your way up. That would be kind of cool. In a way. Well, I mean, one site map I mean, maybe that would play into your like, heavy defender sided or something, right? Like, like just a one site map, and like there's a lot of like a kind of it wouldn't be anti-fracture, I guess, but it'd be like fracture, but just like squished into one.
Yeah, just like an
Where you
entrenchment map where it's
yeah,
like you
like a
just have to.
ring. Yeah,
Yeah,
and you're like inside a fort basically, and you're just surrounded but have to defend the fort. I mean, that would kind of go pretty hard. I think that would be
just
quite
play
cool.
5 Sentinels and then just forfeit the attack side.
Yeah, that actually,
uh,
I think that could be pretty cool.
that could be interesting. I mean, I wouldn't put it past Valorant to do some weird stuff with maps. They've already proved that they will mix it up. I've got one last question before we close out
Go on.
the stream. Do you think that Valorant needs more suppression effects? Because right now we have like multiple recons. We obviously have a bunch of different smokes. We've got several different stunning agents. We've got a bunch of different like dog agents or drone agents. We've got a bunch of different flash agents. Right now, aside from the Gecko ult, which detains people, well, actually, we don't. There's one agent that suppresses stuff, meaning turns off utility. Do we need more of that in the game?
I would be surprised if we got the next two Sentinel agents and one of them didn't have some kind of like alarm bot that's suppressed. I
Mhm.
think that that's a pretty obvious, like, makes sense for a Sentinel thing of like, oh, I put my alarm bot here, you get suppressed, and now, you can't exec on me because you don't
Mhm.
have any util, right? So it's just a great way. Like that's their stall is just I catch you with a little trap. It's not like an information necessarily. Like it could give you information, I guess, but like it goes off. They're suppressed. Oh, you can't do an exec. I think that just makes sense for Sentinel. The only thing that maybe it would be interesting how they would fit into the lore because of course KO is from the future and it's like a future robot. So I guess maybe they would fit into the lore by saying like, this doctor worked on KO or this professor like, tinkered with KO and figured out their secrets of how to do it, I guess. Because otherwise it's like, well, KO's from like 1,000 years in the future or something, isn't he? And then
True.
has come
Yeah.
back. So
Yeah.
it would be interesting to see how they got that in there. I don't even really understand the KO lore, to be honest. I was kind of a bit lost with the lore. I don't know the lore about Clove either. I should probably learn it. But yeah, I think that Sentinel suppression it just seems to make sense, right? It just
Mhm.
makes a lot of sense to have that. But then they might think like, oh, if you play that with KO, you just suppress the whole game. I could see why maybe they might think that it's not a great idea.
Yeah, that's fair. Okay, well, I think that is it. So we'll end it here. Thanks everybody for tuning in. This has been Cosmic Divide episode 21. And yeah, let us know if you liked it as a live stream version. We'll see if we'll do the next one is this way as well. And thanks for watching, listening, and we'll see you next time. Peace.